Sophia Grant stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. The burgundy dress hugged curves she usually hid beneath loose sweaters and professional blouses. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders instead of being pulled into its usual tight bun. The mascara made her green eyes look wider, brighter, almost defiant. She had owned this dress for 3 years. Never worn it. Never had a reason to. Tonight wasn't really a reason either, but it was something else. A statement. A goodbye that nobody would understand except her. Her phone sat on the counter beside her makeup bag. The Instagram app was already open. She angled the camera, checked the lighting, and took the photo before she could talk herself out of it. The mirror caught everything. The dress. The confident posture she didn't quite feel. The small smile that said she was moving forward. Her finger hovered over the post button. This was stupid. Childish, even. But 2 years of being invisible had worn her down to nothing. And she needed something. Anything. To prove she had existed in his world at all. She typed the caption quickly before logic could intervene. New chapter. Added a sparkle emoji. Posted. The phone lit up immediately with likes from friends, former classmates, the regular customers at the bar where she worked 3 nights a week. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that she had spent the last 24 months trapped in a professional purgatory of her own making. Sophia set the phone down and started removing the makeup. The dress would go back in the closet. Tomorrow she would return to being the woman Anthony Rinaldi saw every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. The competent translator with unremarkable features who processed his Italian documents without asking questions. Except tomorrow was actually the beginning of her last week. 5 more days, then she would board a bus to Boston and start over. The translation agency there had offered her a full-time position with benefits, steady hours, and absolutely no connection to organized crime or men with dark eyes who looked through her like she was furniture. Her phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Sophia ignored it, reaching for the makeup remover. Probably her friend Ashley commenting on the photo, demanding to know where she was going dressed like that. Ashley knew about the Boston job, but not about Anthony. Nobody knew about Anthony. There was nothing to know, really, except that Sophia had made the catastrophic mistake of falling in love with her employer, who treated her with the same warmth he showed his coffee maker. The buzzing stopped. Started again. A phone call this time. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Definitely Ashley using a different phone to be dramatic. Sophia declined the call and went back to wiping off her lipstick. Then the banging started. Sharp, insistent knocks on her apartment door that echoed through the small space. Sophia froze, makeup remover wipe pressed against her cheek. She lived alone in a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that was safe enough but not friendly enough for random visits at 11 at night. Her closest neighbor was an elderly woman who went to bed at 8. The knocking came again. Harder. More demanding. She grabbed her phone, pulled on the oversized cardigan hanging by the bathroom door, and approached the front door carefully. The peephole showed a figure she recognized instantly despite the distortion. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the black dress shirt and tailored pants that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Anthony Rinaldi was standing outside her apartment. Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs. In 2 years of working for him, he had never come to her home. She went to his mansion in the nice part of town, sat in his office, translated his documents, collected her payment, and left. That was the arrangement. That was the boundary. He knocked again. Her hands shook as she unlocked the deadbolt. The chain stayed on as she opened the door just wide enough to see him properly. He looked exactly as he did every time she saw him. Perfectly composed, intensely focused, and completely out of place in her shabby hallway with its peeling wallpaper and flickering light fixture. His dark hair was styled precisely. Not a strand out of place. His jaw was tight, a muscle flexing near his ear, and his eyes, those deep brown eyes that never really looked at her, were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Mr. Rinaldi. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Is everything all right? Did something happen with the documents? Open the door. Not a request. A command. The same tone he used when discussing business with men twice his size who obeyed without question. It's late. Sophia said, aware of how weak the protest sounded. If there's an issue with the translation, I can come by the house tomorrow. Open the door, Sophia. He never used her first name. In 2 years, it had always been Miss Grant. Formal, professional, distant. Her fingers fumbled with the chain. She told herself it was because he was her employer, and she couldn't refuse. She told herself it was because something might genuinely be wrong. She didn't let herself acknowledge the real reason, that hearing her name in his voice did something to her that made rational thought impossible. The door swung open. Anthony stepped inside without waiting for invitation, and suddenly her small apartment felt even smaller. He took up too much space, made too much of an impression. The scent of his cologne filled the air, something expensive and woodsy that she had learned to associate with Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. He closed the door behind him, locked it. The click of the deadbolt sounded impossibly loud. What were you thinking? His voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it that Sophia had never heard before. Something rough. I don't understand. The photo. He pulled out his phone, turned the screen toward her. Her Instagram post glowed in the dim light of her apartment. What were you thinking posting this? Sophia's face heated. That's my personal account. I can post whatever I want. Who's going to see it? My friends. People I know. Nobody who... She stopped, realization dawning. You follow my Instagram? I asked you a question. And I asked you one. Sophia crossed her arms, the oversized cardigan bunching around her wrists. She was still wearing the burgundy dress underneath, suddenly hyper-aware of it. How do you even know my Instagram? I never told you. That's not relevant. It's relevant to me. They stared at each other. Sophia had never challenged him before, never pushed back, never done anything except nod politely and complete her work. 2 years of yes, sir, and right away, and I'll have that done by tomorrow. Anthony's jaw worked. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, then took a step closer. Sophia instinctively stepped back. Her spine hit the wall beside the door. You never wear dresses, he said. The observation came out flat, factual, but his eyes betrayed something else as they traveled down from her face to the burgundy fabric, to where the cardigan hung open. You never wear your hair down. You've been paying that much attention to what I wear? The words escaped before Sophia could stop them. Where were you going? Nowhere. I was home. I am home. Then why? He stopped himself, seemed to be choosing words carefully. Why post a photo like that? Like what? Like you're... Another pause. Like you're available. Sophia laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. Nothing like the quiet professional version of herself she had maintained so carefully. Available? I posted a photo in a dress, Mr. Rinaldi. That doesn't make me available. And even if it did, what exactly would that have to do with you? His eyes snapped back to her face. Delete it. No. Sophia, no. She pushed away from the wall, forced herself to stand straighter even though her knees felt weak. You don't get to show up at my apartment at 11 at night and tell me what to do with my personal life. You're my employer. That's where your authority ends. Were you meeting someone? The question came out harder than the previous ones. Is that why you're dressed like this? Some man who what? Sophia's anger flared hot and bright. 2 years. 2 years of loving him silently, hopelessly, pathetically. 2 years of watching him look through her, past her, around her. And now he was standing in her apartment acting like he had any right to care about what she wore or who she saw. Some man who might actually notice I exist. Some man who might look at me like I'm a person instead of a piece of office equipment. The words hung between them. Sophia's breath came too fast, her heart hammering. She had said too much, revealed too much, destroyed the careful professional relationship she had built. Anthony went very still. His eyes searched her face, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. I notice you. No, you don't. Sophia's voice cracked. You notice when your documents are translated incorrectly. You notice when I'm late. You notice when I forget to staple the pages together. But you don't notice me. That's not true. When's my birthday, Mr. Rinaldi? He didn't answer. What's my favorite color? What kind of coffee do I drink? Do I have siblings? Where did I grow up? She fired the questions at him, watching his expression remain blank. You don't know anything about me because you've never asked. Because I'm invisible to you. I have been for 2 years. You're not. I am, and that's fine. That's what you pay me for, really. To be competent and forgettable. To show up, do my work, and disappear. Sophia moved toward the door, hand on the knob. But that photo? That was for me. Not for you. Not for anyone else. Just for me. One picture where I look like someone who matters. Someone who exists outside of your office. And I'm not deleting it because you decided tonight that you suddenly care what I do. She opened the door. An invitation for him to leave. An end to whatever this confrontation was. Anthony didn't move. He stood in the center of her small living room, expensive and out of place among her secondhand furniture and fading curtains. His hands curled into fists at his sides, then relaxed. His breathing was controlled but heavier than normal. Close the door, he said quietly. Mr. Rinaldi, Anthony. He took a step toward her. If we're going to have this conversation, use my name. We're not having any conversation. You're leaving. November 7th. Sophia blinked. What? Your birthday. November 7th. You'll be 28. He took another step closer. You drink tea, not coffee. Earl Grey with too much sugar. You have a younger brother named Ryan who's studying engineering in Ohio. You grew up in a small town outside Cleveland. Your favorite color is teal, but you never wear it because you think it makes you look unprofessional. The air left Sophia's lungs. She stood frozen, hand still on the doorknob, staring at him. You translate faster when you're anxious, Anthony continued. His voice was softer now, almost gentle. You bite your bottom lip when you're concentrating. You always arrive exactly 15 minutes early because you're terrified of being late. You organize the documents by date even though I never asked you to. And every single Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 2 years, you've walked into my office wearing clothes that hide everything interesting about you because you think that's what I want. How do you... I notice everything about you, Sophia. Every detail. Every day. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. I notice you so much that it's become a problem. Her hand fell from the doorknob. Then why did you never say anything? Because noticing you was one thing. Acting on it was something else entirely. His gaze dropped to the burgundy dress again, then back up. And then tonight, I saw that photo. Saw you looking like that, smiling like that. And all I could think was that some other man was going to see it too. Some man who doesn't know that you hate the smell of lilies, or that you read romance novels on the subway, or that you're afraid of heights but pretend you're not. You don't have any right to be jealous, Sophia whispered. I know. You never gave me any indication that you... I know that too. They stood there. The tension so thick Sophia could barely breathe through it. She should tell him to leave. Should close the door literally and figuratively on whatever this was. Should protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Why did you tell me to delete the photo?" Anthony's expression shifted. The control cracked just slightly, letting something darker and more honest show through. Because I didn't want anyone else seeing you like that. Didn't want them thinking you were... He stopped, jaw clenching. That photo was supposed to be for someone, and I couldn't stand the idea that it wasn't for me. Sophia's pulse thundered in her ears. Anthony Rinaldi stood in her cramped apartment, having just admitted he didn't want anyone else seeing her photo. The confession hung between them like smoke, thick and impossible to ignore. It wasn't for anyone, she said finally. Her voice came out rough, unsteady. It was goodbye. His eyes narrowed. Goodbye to what? To you. To this. She gestured vaguely between them. To 2 years of translating documents and pretending I don't feel anything. Sophia. No. You don't get to do this. The anger that had been simmering for months suddenly boiled over. You don't get to show up here acting like you have some claim on me when you've spent 2 years treating me like I'm part of the furniture. You want to know why I posted that photo? Because I needed proof that I existed as something other than your translator. Because next week I'm leaving, and I wanted one picture where I looked like a woman someone might actually want, instead of the invisible employee you see every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Anthony went very still. What do you mean, leaving? Sophia pushed past him, suddenly needing distance. She walked to the small kitchen table where her laptop sat open, pulled out the printed email confirmation from underneath it, and held it up. I accepted a job in Boston. Translation agency, full-time position, benefits. I start a week from Monday. He stared at the paper like it was a weapon pointed at his chest. When were you going to tell me? I wrote a resignation letter. It's in my bag. I was going to give it to you on Tuesday. She set the confirmation down, crossed her arms. You would have found a replacement in a few days. Someone just as competent who doesn't make things complicated. Complicated. He repeated the word slowly, testing it. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. 5 minutes ago, you were just my employer. Now you're standing in my apartment saying you notice everything about me, that you're jealous of a photo on Instagram. So yes, Anthony, it's complicated. He flinched slightly at the use of his first name. Sophia had never said it out loud before. It felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her chest tight. Show me the tickets, he said abruptly. What? You said you have bus tickets to Boston. Show me. Sophia hesitated, then retrieved her purse from the counter. The tickets were tucked into the side pocket, already printed, already paid for. She handed them over without a word. Anthony examined them carefully. His jaw clenched as he read the date, the time, the seat assignment. 6 days from now. Yes. And you've already packed? Half my suitcase is done. Most of my stuff will fit in 2 bags. She watched his face, trying to read the emotions flickering across it. I don't have much. He looked up from the tickets. Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy? Because you weren't supposed to care. The admission came out softer than she intended. I'm your employee. My personal feelings aren't your concern. They are, if they make you leave. I'm leaving because staying is killing me. The words burst out before Sophia could stop them. Do you have any idea what it's like to be in love with someone who looks right through you? To spend hours in your office 3 days a week, knowing that you're thinking about business deals and territory disputes, and God knows what else while I'm sitting there trying not to stare at you like an idiot. Anthony's expression shifted. Something raw and unguarded flickered in his eyes. You're in love with me. Don't. Sophia turned away, heat flooding her face. Don't make me say it again. I already feel pathetic. Look at me. No. Sophia. His voice dropped lower, gentle but insistent. Look at me. She forced herself to turn back around. He had moved closer without her noticing, now standing just a few feet away. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. You think I look through you, he said quietly. You think I don't notice. But I know that you organize my documents by date even though the system makes no difference to me because it makes you feel more in control. I know you take the stairs instead of the elevator when you come to the mansion because you're afraid of small spaces, but too proud to admit it. I know you wear the same silver bracelet every single day because it was your mother's, and you touch it whenever you're nervous. Sophia's hand instinctively went to her wrist, to the thin chain she never removed. How do you... I told you. I notice everything. He took another step closer. I notice when you bite your lip because you're trying not to correct my terrible Italian pronunciation. I notice when you stay late finishing translations because you refuse to leave work incomplete. I notice that you never ask for advances on your payment, even when I can see you're struggling financially. I notice you, Sophia, every damn day for 2 years. Then why? Her voice cracked. Why did you never say anything? Why did you treat me like I was just another employee? Anthony's expression darkened. Because I was trying to protect you. From what? From me. From my life. From everything that comes with being close to someone like me. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the perfect styling for the first time since she'd known him. You think you know what I do. But you don't. You translate documents about shipping manifests and property acquisitions. You don't see the meetings that happen after you leave. You don't know about the men who would hurt you just to get leverage over me. You're in the Mafia. Sophia said it flatly, without judgment. She had suspected for months but never asked. I'm not stupid. I know what some of those documents really mean. Knowing and understanding are different things. Anthony's voice took on an edge. The O'Sullivan family has been watching my movements for the last 6 months. They're Irish, territorial, and they don't like that I've been expanding into areas they consider theirs. They look for weaknesses. They look for people I care about. But you don't care about me. Not officially. I'm just your translator. You think that matters? His laugh was sharp, bitter. They photograph everyone who enters my property regularly. They track patterns. They already know your name, where you live, where you work. If they wanted to use you against me, they could. The only thing keeping you safe is that they think you're insignificant. The words stung more than Sophia expected, so staying invisible keeps me alive. Is that it? That was the idea. Was? Anthony's jaw clenched. I saw your photo tonight. Saw you looking like that, dressed like you were going somewhere, living your life. And all I could think was that you were moving forward without me. That in a week, you'd be in Boston starting over, and I'd be here knowing I let you go because it was safer. It is safer, Sophia whispered. I don't care anymore. The admission hung between them. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to close the distance, to touch him, to do something with the tension crackling in the air. But fear held her frozen. You should care, she said. If what you're saying is true, if being close to you puts me in danger, then this, she gestured helplessly between them. This is a terrible idea, probably the worst one I've ever had. Anthony moved closer still, close enough that Sophia could feel the heat radiating off him. But seeing that photo broke something in me. Knowing you were leaving broke something else. I spent 2 years being rational, keeping my distance, doing the right thing. And it didn't matter. You're still leaving. You still fell in love with me. The O'Sullivans still know who you are. All I did was waste 2 years I could have spent actually being with you. Sophia's breath came faster. You can't just decide now that you want me. You can't show up here and expect... I'm not expecting anything. He stopped just inches away. I'm asking. Stay in New York. Let me protect you properly. Not from a distance. Let me... He stopped. Seemed to struggle with the words. Let me try to be what you need. What about what you need? Sophia forced herself to hold his gaze. You said it yourself. People close to you become targets. Are you really willing to risk that? Or is this just jealousy talking? Because in a few days, you'll remember why you kept your distance. And I'll be right back to being invisible, except this time it'll hurt more, because I'll know you almost wanted me. Something flickered across Anthony's face. Pain, maybe. Or regret. You think this is just jealousy. I don't know what else it could be. You went 2 years without... I went 2 years fighting this. His voice dropped to something raw and honest. Every time you walked into my office, I had to remind myself why touching you was a bad idea. Why asking about your day would lead to caring more than I should. Why offering you more money or better working conditions would make you a more obvious target. I built walls between us because the alternative was pulling you into my world and watching something happen to you. But now you're leaving anyway. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips grazed her cheek. Now I'm realizing that protecting you by staying away didn't actually protect you. It just meant I missed 2 years of this. Sophia's skin burned where he'd touched her. She should step back. Should maintain the professional distance they'd kept for so long. Should remember that this man was dangerous in ways that went beyond the obvious attraction pulling her toward him. Instead, she found herself asking, 2 years of what? Knowing what your hair feels like. Whether you'd lean into my touch or pull away. His hand moved to cup her jaw, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Whether that photo on Instagram was even close to how beautiful you look in person. Anthony, I know this is selfish. I know asking you to stay is the opposite of keeping you safe. But I can't, his voice caught. I can't watch you walk away knowing I never even tried. They stood frozen in that moment, his hand on her face. Their breathing synchronized. Sophia could feel her resolve crumbling. 2 years of loving him from a careful distance, and now he was here, touching her, saying things she'd imagined 1,000 times but never believed would be real. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Yes. You're going to hurt me. I'll try not to. That's not a promise." "No," Anthony agreed. "It's not, but it's honest." Sophia closed her eyes, felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Boston meant safety. A fresh start. A life without complications. Staying meant danger she couldn't fully understand. A relationship that might not survive the world he lived in. And the very real possibility of getting her heart shattered. But it also meant having him. Actually having him, instead of just wanting him from across a desk. She opened her eyes. Anthony was watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. Waiting, not pushing. Giving her the choice he'd taken away by keeping his distance for 2 years. "The tickets are non-refundable," she said finally. His expression didn't change. "I'll buy you new ones, whenever you want to leave. The job offer is good. Stable salary, benefits. I'll match it. Double it if that's what it takes." "That's not..." Sophia stopped, shook her head. "You can't just throw money at this and make it okay. Then tell me what would make it okay." His thumb traced her jawline. "Tell me what you need. I need you to mean it." The words came out barely above a whisper. "I need this to be more than just jealousy over a photo. More than wanting something you can't have. Because if I stay, if I let myself believe this is real, and then you wake up next week and remember all the reasons you kept your distance." Her voice broke. "I won't survive that." Anthony's free hand came up to frame her other cheek, holding her face gently between his palms. "I've wanted you since the 3rd time you walked into my office. You were wearing a gray sweater, and you corrected a translator error that would have cost me $50,000. You didn't even realize you'd saved me money. You just wanted the work to be perfect." Sophia's heart stuttered. "That was 2 years ago. I know. You never said anything. I'm saying it now." He leaned closer, forehead nearly touching hers. "I'm saying I notice you. I want you. And if you stay, I'll spend every day proving that this isn't about jealousy or control or any of the other things you think it might be. What if the O'Sullivans? Then I'll handle them. But you don't get to use them as an excuse to run." His voice gentled. "If you want to go to Boston because you don't feel the same way anymore, because I waited too long and you're done, I'll understand. But if you're running because you're scared of getting hurt, you should know..." He paused. "You should know that watching you leave will hurt worse than anything the O'Sullivans could do to me." The confession broke something loose in Sophia's chest. She pulled back just enough to see his face clearly. "You're serious about this?" "Yes. Even though it's dangerous. Even though I'm..." "Don't." Anthony's grip on her face tightened slightly. "Don't finish that sentence by putting yourself down. You're brilliant and brave and too good for this life, but I'm too selfish to let that stop me from asking you to stay." Sophia's hands came up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat under her palms, rapid and unsteady. He was as affected as she was. The control he always showed was cracking, and underneath it was just a man who wanted something he thought he couldn't have. "I need time," she said. "To think, to figure out if this is..." "Take whatever time you need." He didn't move away. "But know that I'm not changing my mind. Not about this." They stood there, caught in the space between what had been and what might be. Sophia's apartment had never felt smaller or more significant. This was the moment everything changed. The pivot point she'd dreamed about and feared in equal measure. Finally, reluctantly, Anthony stepped back. His hands dropped from her face. "I should go." "Let you think." Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, that photo, you looked incredible. But you look better now, angry at me, finally telling me the truth." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, and Sophia was alone with her half-packed suitcase, her non-refundable bus tickets, and the impossible choice between safety and everything she'd ever wanted. 3 days passed before Sophia returned to the Rinaldi mansion. 3 days of turning the conversation over in her mind, analyzing every word, every touch, every promise Anthony had made in her cramped apartment. She hadn't slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his hands on her face, heard his voice saying he'd wanted her for 2 years. The resignation letter sat in her bag, professionally typed and formally worded. She had rewritten it twice, trying to find language that didn't reveal too much about why she was leaving. In the end, she'd settled on simple phrases about new opportunities and personal growth. Nothing about love or fear or the impossible situation she'd found herself in. The morning was crisp and cold as she climbed the steps to the mansion's entrance. Her hands trembled slightly as she rang the bell. This wasn't her usual Tuesday visit. She had called ahead, asked if she could come by to discuss something important. The housekeeper who answered had sounded surprised but agreed immediately. The heavy door swung open. A woman Sophia recognized but had never formally met stood there. Mid-50s, kind eyes, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress and sensible shoes. "Miss Grant," the woman said warmly. "Please, come in. I'm Lucia. We've never been properly introduced, but I've seen you here many times." Sophia stepped into the familiar foyer, but today it felt different. Everything looked the same. The marble floors, the expensive artwork on the walls, the curved staircase leading to the second floor. But her perception had shifted. This wasn't just her employer's house anymore. It was the home of a man who claimed to have been watching her for 2 years. "Mr. Rinaldi is expecting you," Lucia continued, leading her deeper into the house. "He asked that you meet him in his private office." That was new. Sophia had always worked in the formal study off the main hallway, a room clearly designed for business meetings with its long table and uncomfortable chairs. She had never ventured further into Anthony's personal space. They climbed the staircase, turned down a hallway Sophia had never seen before. The decor became less formal here. Framed photographs on the walls, a reading nook with worn leather chairs, signs that someone actually lived in this massive house. Lucia stopped at a heavy wooden door. "Go right in. He's waiting." Sophia knocked anyway. Old habits. "Come in," Anthony's voice, muffled by the door. She pushed it open and stepped into a room that was undeniably his. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in multiple languages, a desk that looked antique and expensive. Windows overlooked the manicured gardens behind the house. The morning light streamed in, making the space feel warmer than the rest of the mansion. Anthony stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger. "Wait a moment," and continued speaking in rapid Italian. Something about shipments and timing, and people whose names Sophia didn't recognize. She took the opportunity to study him. He wore black pants and a charcoal dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No tie. His hair was slightly less perfect than usual, like he'd been running his hands through it. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well either. He ended the call, set the phone down, and looked at her properly. His expression was guarded, giving nothing away. "You came. I said I would." Sophia pulled the resignation letter from her bag, held it up. "I brought this. It's official now." Anthony's jaw tightened, but he didn't reach for the letter. "Before you give me that, I need to show you something. Anthony, please." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. 5 minutes. Then you can hand me that letter and walk away if you still want to." Sophia hesitated, then sat. The leather chair was comfortable, clearly used regularly. She wondered how many business deals had been negotiated from this exact spot. Anthony opened a drawer, pulled out a manila folder, and placed it on the desk between them. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he watched her face carefully. "What I'm about to show you will change how you see this situation," he said quietly. "Once you know, you can't unknow it. Are you sure you want to see? You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to be honest." He pushed the folder toward her. "Open it." Sophia's hands shook slightly as she picked up the folder. Inside were photographs. Surveillance photos, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from a distance. The first one showed the front of the Rinaldi mansion. The second showed her walking down the front steps, translation bag over her shoulder, wearing the gray sweater she'd worn last Tuesday. Her stomach dropped. "When was this taken?" "Last week. Keep looking." The next photo showed her at the subway station 3 blocks from her apartment, then one of her entering the bar where she worked Thursday nights. Another of her buying coffee at the shop on her corner. Every image was stamped with a date and time in the bottom corner. Who took these? Sophia's voice came out thin. Michael O'Sullivan's people. He runs the Irish operations in 3 boroughs. We've been having territorial disputes for the last 6 months. Anthony pulled out another set of photos, these ones showing different angles of Sophia's building. Her walking to work, her meeting her friend Ashley for lunch 2 weeks ago. They've been tracking everyone who comes to this house regularly, building profiles, looking for leverage. Sophia's hands trembled as she sorted through the images. There were at least 20 photos of her. Different days, different locations, always alone and unaware she was being watched. Why? She managed. Because they want to know who matters to me, who they could use to pressure me into giving up territory or accepting unfavorable terms. Anthony leaned forward, his expression intense. You thought being invisible kept you safe. But Sophia, they've known about you for months. They know where you live, where you work, what your patterns are. Going to Boston doesn't change that. It just means you'd be alone and unprotected when they decided to make a move. But I'm nobody. The protest came out weak. I'm just your translator. Do you think they care? They see you here 3 times a week, consistently, for 2 years. That's enough to make you interesting. He pulled out another document. This one printed communications, emails and text messages. These were intercepted from one of O'Sullivan's lieutenants. Read the highlighted sections. Sophia's eyes scanned the page. Phrases jumped out at her. Rinaldi's translator. Comes every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Vulnerable access point. Recommend escalation within 2 weeks. The room tilted slightly. Sophia gripped the edge of the desk, forcing herself to breathe steadily. They're planning something. Yes. Involving me. Yes. She looked up at him. His expression was grim, but not surprised. He had known about this, had been carrying this knowledge while she'd been debating whether to stay or go, completely unaware that the choice might not be hers to make. How long have you known? She asked. 3 weeks. That's when my security team intercepted the communications. Anthony ran a hand through his hair, disrupting it further. I've been trying to figure out how to handle it without involving you directly. But then you posted that photo and I realized I was out of time. So that's why you came to my apartment. Not because you were jealous. Because you wanted to warn me. Both things can be true. He held her gaze. I was jealous. Seeing you dressed like that, knowing you were moving forward with your life, it made me insane. But I also needed you to understand that leaving doesn't solve this problem. It might actually make it worse. Sophia set the photos down carefully. Her mind raced through possibilities, consequences, the rapidly shrinking list of safe options. What do they want? Money? Information? Leverage. If they take you, they can force me to make concessions. Give up territories. Renegotiate agreements. Maybe even step down from certain operations. Anthony's voice was steady, almost clinical, but his hands had curled into fists on the desk. They won't kill you. You're more valuable alive. But they would hurt you, scare you, use you to break me. The casual way he said it made everything feel surreal. Sophia had known abstractly that Anthony was involved in dangerous business. She had translated enough documents to understand that his operations existed in legal gray areas at best. But hearing him talk about kidnapping and leverage and hurting her as tactical moves in some larger game made it horrifyingly real. I called the agency in Boston this morning, she said suddenly. Before I came here, I told them I couldn't accept the position. Anthony's expression shifted. Why? Because you were right. Running away doesn't solve anything. And because... She stopped, gathered her courage. Because I spent 3 days trying to convince myself I could walk away from you, and I couldn't. I've been in love with you for too long to suddenly stop just because it's complicated. Something in his face softened. You turned down the job. I turned down the job, she confirmed. Before I saw any of this. Before I knew about the O'Sullivans or the photos or the threat. I made that choice because I wanted to stay. Not because I felt trapped. Sophia, but now I need to know what staying actually means. She gestured at the photos spread across his desk. You said I'm in danger. How do we fix that? Anthony stood, walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. I can protect you. Real protection. Not the distant kind where I pretend you don't matter. But it means changes. Security following you. Living somewhere more secure. Potentially living here until we resolve the O'Sullivan situation. Here? In your house? In the guest wing. Separate entrance, separate living space. You'd have privacy but also protection. Round-the-clock security, controlled access, everything monitored. He crouched down so they were at eye level. I know it sounds extreme, but these people don't make idle threats. That communication said within 2 weeks. We're already 3 days into that window. Sophia's breath came faster. This was more than complicated. This was her entire life changing overnight. For how long? Until we neutralize the threat. I'm working on a meeting with O'Sullivan, trying to reach a territorial agreement that makes this unnecessary. But until that happens, I need to know you're safe. And what am I to you while I'm living here? The question came out sharper than she intended. Am I still just your translator? Your employee who happens to need protection? Or are we... She couldn't finish the sentence. Anthony reached up, cupped her face the same way he had in her apartment. You're the woman I've been in love with for 2 years. The woman I was too afraid to claim because claiming you meant putting you at risk. But you're at risk anyway now. So I'm asking, let me protect you properly. Let me be with you the way I should have been from the start. Before Sophia could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Anthony pulled back, frustration flashing across his face. Come in. The door opened to reveal a man Sophia had seen before. Tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair, and the alert posture of someone trained for security work. Anthony's driver, though she suspected that was only part of his actual job. Boss? The man said. Sorry to interrupt. You said to let you know if anything developed with the surveillance situation. Daniel. Anthony stood, helped Sophia to her feet. This is Sophia Grant. Sophia. Daniel heads my security team. Daniel nodded respectfully at her. Miss Grant, I want you to know that what Mr. Rinaldi is telling you is accurate. We've confirmed that your image has been circulated among O'Sullivan's people. At least 3 of his men have been seen in your neighborhood in the last week. The confirmation from a third party made Sophia's knees weak. This wasn't just Anthony trying to manipulate her into staying. This was real threat, real danger, real people watching her life. 3 men, she repeated numbly. We've identified 2 of them. Low-level enforcers, nothing sophisticated. But their presence means O'Sullivan is serious about this. Daniel's expression was sympathetic, but professional. Mr. Rinaldi's offer of protection is the best option you have right now. Sophia looked between them. Anthony with his intense gaze and barely controlled emotion. Daniel with his matter-of-fact assessment of her danger. Everything she had built, every careful boundary she had maintained was crumbling. If I stay, she said slowly, if I accept this protection and move into the guest wing, I need something from you. Anything, Anthony said immediately. Honesty, complete honesty. No more pretending you don't care to keep me safe. No more distance for my own good. If we're doing this, if I'm trusting you with my life, I need to know exactly where I stand with you, not what's convenient or strategic. The truth. Anthony took her hands, held them firmly. The truth is, I should have done this 2 years ago. The truth is, I'm terrified of what might happen to you because of me. The truth is, I'm also too selfish to let you walk away now that I finally have the chance to be with you. And the truth is, he paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. The truth is, I love you. I'm in love with you. And if you let me, I'll spend every day proving that this isn't about control or convenience. It's about not losing the best thing that's ever walked into my life. Sophia's eyes burned. She squeezed his hands, anchored herself to the solid warmth of him. Okay, I'll stay. I'll accept the protection. I'll move into the guest wing. She managed a shaky smile. I'll let you prove you mean all of this. The tension in Anthony's shoulders released. He pulled her closer, pressed his forehead against hers. Thank you. Daniel cleared his throat politely. I'll coordinate moving Miss Grant's belongings. We should do it today, before anyone notices the change in pattern. Do it, Anthony said without looking away from Sophia. Whatever she needs, make it happen. As Daniel left, closing the door behind him, Sophia allowed herself to sink into Anthony's embrace. Her resignation letter still sat on the desk, unread, and now unnecessary. The photos of her surveillance spread across the surface like evidence of how thoroughly her life had already been invaded. This wasn't the choice she had imagined making, but standing there in Anthony's arms, feeling safer than she had in days despite the danger surrounding them, Sophia realized something important. Sometimes love meant choosing the complicated path. Sometimes it meant walking toward the danger instead of away from it. And sometimes being seen, really, truly seen, was worth the risk. Sophia's belongings arrived at the Rinaldi mansion in 2 modest suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes. Everything she owned fit into Daniel's SUV with room to spare. Watching her entire life loaded into a vehicle that probably cost more than a year of her rent made her feel small and slightly embarrassed, though no one commented on it. The guest suite was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that were still green despite the late autumn chill. The bedroom had a king-sized bed with expensive linens. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, and there was even a small sitting area with a couch and reading lamp. A separate entrance led to a private hallway, giving her the independence Anthony had promised. Lucia appeared in the doorway as Sophia was unpacking her second suitcase. The housekeeper carried fresh towels and wore the same warm expression from earlier. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed," Lucia said, setting the towels on the bathroom counter. "If there's anything missing, just let me know. I've been managing this house for 15 years. Nothing surprises me anymore." Sophia smiled despite her nerves. "It's beautiful. More than I expected. Mr. Rinaldi was very specific about which room you should have. He wanted you to have the best view." Lucia paused, then added more quietly, "It's good to see him with someone who humanizes him. He's been alone too long, carrying too much weight by himself." The observation caught Sophia off guard. "You've known him a long time?" "Since he was 19 and suddenly responsible for everything his father left behind. I watched him grow into the man he is now, watched him build walls to protect himself." Lucia's expression softened. "You're the first person I've seen him let close in years. That means something." Before Sophia could respond, Lucia excused herself with instructions to come down for dinner at 7. Sophia finished unpacking in a daze, hanging her modest wardrobe in a closet designed for someone with far more clothing. Her romance novels looked out of place on the expensive bookshelves. Her worn laptop sat awkwardly on the elegant desk. Her phone buzzed on the edge of the desk, the screen flashing a name that made her stomach twist. Ashley. She'd ignored her for too long. Missed calls, frantic messages. That familiar, stubborn persistence that had once felt comforting and now felt dangerous. Ashley didn't know about Anthony. She didn't know about surveillance photos or men with quiet eyes who memorized routines. She only knew Sophia had promised Boston, promised a fresh start, and then disappeared. Sophia picked up the phone and forced her hands to steady. Ordinary words. Safe words. "Ash, I'm okay. The Boston job changed at the last minute. I took a short-term private contract, and I'm staying on site for a while. It's secure, and I'm not supposed to have my phone on much. Please don't worry. I'll call you as soon as I can. I promise." She hit send and immediately hated how thin it sounded, but thin was better than true. A reply came almost at once. "You scared the hell out of me. Call me. Tonight." Sophia's throat tightened. Tonight was impossible. But she could give Ashley something that wasn't a lie. "Soon," she typed, and then added, "I love you. I'm sorry." This wasn't her world, but it was the world she'd chosen. The first 2 days passed in strange limbo. Sophia woke in luxury she wasn't accustomed to, wandered the parts of the house she was allowed to access, and tried not to feel like an imposter. Anthony was polite but distant, clearly giving her space to adjust. They spoke briefly at breakfast, exchanged pleasantries when they passed in hallways, but the intensity from his office had been carefully packed away. It made Sophia want to scream. She hadn't moved here for politeness. She'd moved here because he'd claimed to love her, because he'd promised honesty, because she was tired of dancing around what they both wanted. On the third evening, Anthony found her in the library. She'd discovered the room that afternoon. Walls of books in multiple languages, comfortable chairs, a fireplace that someone had already lit against the cold. She was curled up reading when he knocked on the doorframe. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Sophia looked up from her book. He'd changed from his usual dress shirt into something more casual, dark jeans and a fitted sweater that emphasized his build. His hair was slightly disheveled, and he looked more relaxed than she'd seen him since she'd moved in. "It's your house," she said. "It's your space now, too." He settled into the chair across from hers, maintaining careful distance. "What are you reading?" She held up the paperback romance novel, slightly embarrassed. "Escapism. You mentioned wanting to write romance." It wasn't a question, but his tone invited elaboration. "Someday, when I'm brave enough to try." Sophia set the book aside. "This is nice, but it feels strange. You're being very careful around me. I'm trying not to overwhelm you. I moved into your house to be protected from people who want to kidnap me. I think we're past the point of overwhelming." She met his eyes directly. "You promised honesty. That includes not pretending we're just polite acquaintances sharing a house." Anthony's expression shifted. Some of the careful control fell away. "You're right. I don't know how to do this." "How to be with you without treating you like something that might break. Try talking to me like a person you actually know. Not your employee, not someone you're protecting. Just me." He was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he said, "Tell me about your parents. You mentioned they died when you were 19, but I don't know the story." The question surprised her. It wasn't what she'd expected. "Car accident. Black ice on the highway outside Cleveland. My dad died on impact. My mom lasted 3 days in the hospital." Sophia's voice remained steady. She'd told this story before, had learned to deliver it without falling apart. "I was in my second year of college. My brother Ryan was 16. We became each other's family after that. That's why you work so hard. Supporting him through school. He has scholarships, but they don't cover everything. And I wanted to make sure he didn't have to worry about money the way I did." She tucked her legs under her. "Your turn. Tell me something real about you." Anthony leaned back in his chair. "My father built this empire from nothing. Worked his way up through the organization, made strategic moves, eliminated competition. By the time I was 15, he controlled half of New York. And then he had a heart attack at 53 and died in his office, leaving me to figure out how to hold everything together." 19, Sophia said, remembering what Lucia had mentioned. "You were so young, old enough to understand what failure would mean. Everyone was watching, waiting to see if the boss's son could actually lead, or if I'd crumble under the pressure." He ran a hand through his hair. "I had to become someone harder, more ruthless. Someone people feared enough to follow without question. But that's not who you are, not completely. No, but it's who I had to be to survive." He looked at her with something raw in his expression. "My sister Valentina was 12 when our father died. I made sure she got out, sent her to boarding school in Switzerland, then university in Europe. She's studying medicine now in Vienna. We video call every week, and she has no idea about most of what I actually do." Sophia absorbed this. "You protected her by keeping her distant. Same strategy I tried with you. Worked better with her because she was young enough not to question it." His mouth twisted wryly. "She thinks I'm a legitimate businessman who happens to be paranoid about security. Does she know about me? Not yet. But I want her to. He stopped, seemed to be choosing words carefully. "I want to introduce you properly, when things are safer. When I can bring her back for a visit without worrying about her becoming another target." The vulnerability in his admission made Sophia's chest tighten. She stood, crossed the space between them, and sat on the arm of his chair. Close, but not quite touching. "Tell me something else. Something you've never told anyone." Anthony looked up at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I used to watch you translate. You'd get this little crease between your eyebrows when you were concentrating, and you'd bite your bottom lip when you found a tricky phrase. I'd start meetings late, just to have an excuse to stay in the room with you longer. That's how you knew all those details. About the tea and the bracelet and everything else. I memorized you. Every detail. It was the only way I could have you." His hand came up tentatively, rested on her knee. "This is better. Actually having you here. Actually being allowed to touch you." Sophia covered his hand with hers. We should have dinner together. Not separately in different parts of the house. Together. I didn't want to assume. I'm assuming. For both of us. She squeezed his hand. Tomorrow night I want to cook. Something normal. No staff. No formal dining room. Just us in the kitchen making dinner like regular people. Anthony's expression softened. You want to cook in my kitchen. I want to do something that doesn't feel like I'm a guest in a fortress. I want to feel like I actually live here, not like I'm hiding in a very expensive safe house. Okay. He stood, and suddenly they were very close. His hand still on her knee, her fingers still wrapped around his. Tomorrow night. The kitchen is yours. They stood like that for a long moment, neither moving, both aware of how easy it would be to close the remaining distance. But Anthony pulled back first, put space between them with visible effort. Slow, he said, more to himself than to her. I promised myself I'd do this right. Sophia wanted to argue that slow was the last thing she needed after 2 years of waiting. But she appreciated the restraint, even as it frustrated her. Tomorrow, then. The next evening, Sophia commandeered the kitchen with Lucia's amused permission. She'd found pasta and fresh vegetables, ingredients for a simple carbonara that her mother had taught her to make years ago. Nothing fancy, just comfort food that reminded her of home. Anthony appeared at 6, rolling up his sleeves and asking what he could do to help. The domesticity of it felt surreal. The dangerous man who ran criminal operations chopping vegetables beside her while she boiled water for pasta. Your technique is terrible, Sophia commented, watching him massacre a bell pepper. Have you ever actually cooked before? I can make coffee and toast. That's about the extent of it. He looked at his uneven pepper slices. This is harder than it looks. Here. Sophia moved beside him, put her hand over his on the knife handle. Steady pressure, let the blade do the work. Don't force it. She guided his hand through a few cuts, aware of how close they were standing, how his warmth radiated against her side. When the pepper was reasonably chopped, she stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. Better, she said, her voice coming out slightly breathless. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Sophia stirring pasta while Anthony finished the vegetables with significantly improved technique. The kitchen filled with the smell of cooking food and something else. Possibility, maybe. Or the beginning of something that felt normal, despite everything else happening around them. I talked to Ryan yesterday, Sophia said while draining the pasta. I told him I moved. How did he take it? He was suspicious. Asked a lot of questions about why I suddenly needed to live somewhere more secure. She mixed the pasta with the sauce, added the vegetables Anthony had prepared. I couldn't exactly tell him the truth, that my employer is in the Mafia and his rivals want to kidnap me. So I said I was house-sitting for a friend who travels a lot. Does he know about me? About how you feel? Sophia plated the food, buying time before answering. He knows I was in love with someone who didn't seem to notice me. I talked about it once when I'd had too much wine on a video call. He told me to quit my job and find someone who appreciated me. Smart brother. He also said that anyone who couldn't see how amazing I was didn't deserve me. She handed Anthony his plate. His exact words. They sat at the kitchen island, rather than the formal dining room. The space felt intimate, informal, like they were actually two people getting to know each other, rather than employer and employee navigating a complicated situation. This is really good, Anthony said after the first bite. Where did you learn to cook like this? My mom. She grew up in an Italian neighborhood in Cleveland, learned from her grandmother. I used to help her every Sunday. Sophia twirled pasta around her fork. It's one of the few things I have left of her. The recipes, the techniques, muscle memory from being in the kitchen together. My mother cooked too. Traditional Italian dishes that my father loved. She'd spend all day preparing meals for his business associates. Anthony's expression went distant. She died when I was 8. Cancer. After that, we had staff to handle meals. My father never wanted to eat in the kitchen anymore. Said it reminded him of her too much. Sophia set down her fork, reached across to touch his hand. I'm sorry. That's young to lose a parent. Young to lose both of them. His fingers curled around hers. We both know what that's like. Building a life from the pieces left behind. They finished eating, talking about lighter things. Books they'd both read, places they wanted to travel, the terrible action movie Sophia had watched in her suite the night before. It felt normal in a way that nothing had felt since the night Anthony appeared at her apartment door. When they were done, Sophia started washing dishes despite Anthony's protest that staff would handle it. "I need to do something normal," she insisted. "Let me wash dishes like a regular person." He joined her at the sink, drying plates as she handed them over. They worked side by side, shoulders occasionally brushing, creating a rhythm that felt practiced despite being new. Sophia reached for a knife at the same moment Anthony did. Their hands collided, fingers tangling. They both froze. The moment stretched. Sophia looked up at Anthony, found him staring down at her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. His hand turned over under hers, palm pressing against palm. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Sophia," he said quietly. Just her name, but it sounded like a question and a prayer all at once. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the warmth of his hand against hers, the proximity of his body, the way he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Anthony's free hand came up to her waist, pulled her gently toward him. She went willingly, heart hammering, aware they were crossing a line they'd been dancing around for days. His forehead lowered to rest against hers. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "I don't want you to stop." He kissed her. Finally, after 2 years of distance and 3 days of careful restraint, Anthony kissed her. It was slow at first, testing, giving her space to pull away. But when she leaned into him, when her hands came up to grip his shirt, the kiss deepened. Sophia had imagined this moment countless times. None of her fantasies compared to the reality. His mouth on hers, his hands pulling her closer, the way he kissed her like she was precious and necessary and his. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads still pressed together. Anthony's hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he said roughly. Before Sophia could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the kitchen door. They sprang apart as Lucia entered, professional mask in place, though her eyes sparkled with knowing amusement. "I'm very sorry to interrupt," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But Daniel is here. He says it's urgent and needs to speak with Mr. Rinaldi immediately." The warmth drained from Anthony's expression, replaced by cold focus. "Where is he?" "Your office. He said it's about the situation you've been monitoring." Anthony's jaw clenched. He looked at Sophia, frustration and regret warring in his eyes. "I need to go," Sophia said, trying to sound steadier than she felt. "It's fine." He hesitated, then kissed her forehead quickly. "We'll finish this conversation later." Then he was gone, striding out of the kitchen with the purposeful gait of someone heading into battle. Lucia gave Sophia a sympathetic look before following him out, leaving Sophia alone with dirty dishes and the lingering warmth of a kiss that had been 2 years in the making. She could hear raised voices from the direction of Anthony's office. Not the words, just the tone. Urgent, angry, tense. Whatever Daniel had discovered, it wasn't good news. Sophia dried the remaining dishes mechanically, her mind racing. One perfect moment of normalcy, and reality had crashed back in. This was her life now. Stolen kisses in kitchens interrupted by security threats. Romance complicated by danger. A relationship built in the spaces between crisis management. She finished cleaning up, turned off the lights, and headed back to her suite. Anthony never came back to finish their dinner. The kitchen stayed empty, and whatever Daniel had told him kept him occupied for the rest of the night. Lying in bed later, Sophia touched her lips, remembering the kiss. Remembering the way Anthony had looked at her like she was everything. Whatever came next, whatever threat Daniel had reported, at least she had that moment. At least now she knew what it felt like to actually be wanted by him. The question was whether they'd get enough moments like that to make everything else worthwhile. Sophia woke with her heart pounding and no idea why. For a second she thought it was a nightmare, the kind that evaporated as soon as she opened her eyes. Then she realized she was already sitting halfway up in bed, fingers fisted in the sheets, breath coming in short, sharp pulls that scraped her throat. The room was dark. Too dark. The heavy curtains blocked out most of the city glow, turning the guest suite into a box of shadows. The only light came from the digital clock on the nightstand, its red numbers glaring 3:08 a.m. into the gloom. She listened. At first she heard nothing but the rush of blood in her ears and the whisper of the HVAC system. The mansion always hummed with quiet, expensive life, hidden vents, silent security systems, all the invisible machinery that made the place run. Tonight the sound made her skin crawl. Then she heard it. A sharp, distant crack. Not loud, but wrong. Not part of the normal soundtrack of a sleeping house. It sounded like glass under stress, like a branch snapping, like something brittle being pushed past its limit. She held her breath. Another crack. Closer this time. Clean and high and ugly. Her body reacted before her brain fully caught up. She swung her feet out of bed, heart slamming against her ribs, and slid off the mattress. The wood floor was cold under her bare soles. Somewhere in the back of her mind, rational Sophia whispered that this was ridiculous, that she was safe in one of the most secure houses in New York, that rich people probably had weird noises all the time. The rest of her was already moving. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, fingers clumsy with sleep and fear. Her thumb hovered over Anthony's name in her recent calls. The door to her suite exploded inward. Sophia screamed, or tried to. The sound tangled in her throat, but it wasn't a stranger in the doorway. Anthony filled the frame, bare-chested, barefoot, wearing dark sweatpants and an expression she had never seen on his face before. Stripped, lethal focus. His gaze swept the room once and zeroed in on her exact location in the dark. "Down," he snapped. "Now." She didn't have time to move. He crossed the room in 3 strides. The window disintegrated. The first bullet punched through the glass with a scream, shards spraying inward in a glittering arc. Sophia saw it in a frozen slice of time. The window exploding, the curtain jerking, the faint flash from outside. And then Anthony hit her. He slammed into her with his full weight, arms wrapping around her waist as he drove them both to the floor. The impact knocked the air out of her lungs. Her shoulder clipped the side of the bed, pain flaring down her arm, but he twisted mid-fall, taking the worst of it himself, dragging her under him. They hit the rug hard. The breath whooshed out of her chest. Before she could inhale, his hand was at the back of her head, pressing her face into the thick fabric, shielding her skull from the floor. The second shot followed the first. This one hit the headboard with a sickening crack. Splinters rained down. A third, a fourth, a fifth punched into the bed, the wall, the dresser. Each gunshot detonated inside her bones, turning her insides to ice. "Don't move," Anthony growled into her hair. "Sophia, do not move." He wasn't lying on her. He was on top of her, his entire body a shield. She could feel every line of him. Solid chest pressed along her back, thighs pinning her legs to the floor, one forearm braced beside her head, the other arm cinched across her middle. The weight should have been suffocating. But the only thing she registered was the fact that there was now an entire, very large man between her and the window. Something pinged off the nightstand. The lamp shattered, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The icy November air rushed through the destroyed glass, carrying the sharp burn of gunpowder and the faint scent of wet grass from the lawn outside. Her mind tried to insist this wasn't real, that she was still in her crappy apartment, waking from a bad dream, that shooting in mansions only happened in movies, and the violent corners of the internet she consciously avoided. Another burst of gunfire obliterated that illusion. The mattress above them jerked and tore as bullets slammed into it, feathers and stuffing raining down on them in a choking cloud. Sophia's fingers dug into the rug. She wanted to clamp her hands over her ears, to block out the sound, but Anthony had both of her arms pinned beneath his chest. All she could do was stare at the tiny patch of rug directly in front of her face and try to remember how to breathe. The shots stopped as suddenly as they'd started. Silence sprawled huge and heavy over the room, broken only by the ragged sound of their breathing and the faint rattle of shattered glass settling. Sophia's ears rang. Somewhere far away, she heard a dog barking, then the muffled echo of men shouting, short, sharp commands, feet pounding over grass and stone. The security team, she realized distantly. They were moving, responding, doing the jobs Anthony paid them to do. "Stay down," he said again, voice low and steady right next to her ear. "You don't move until I say." She nodded against the rug. Her throat was too tight for words. He shifted slightly, and she felt him reach toward the nightstand with one hand, stretching above them. Wood scraped. Something clacked. When his arm came back into her blurred field of vision, he was holding a gun. Of course he kept a gun in her room. Of course he did. This was his world. "You didn't go to bed unarmed when half the city wanted what you had," he spoke, and she realized there was something in his other ear, an earpiece she hadn't noticed before in the chaos. "Talk to me," he ordered. "East side. Status." Static crackled. Then Daniel's voice clipped and calm. "Perimeter breach on the east lawn. 2 shooters confirmed. Teams engaging. Stay with Miss Grant. We'll clear it." "How many down?" Anthony's voice dropped even lower. "1 neutralized. 1 runner. We're pursuing. Vehicle seen leaving the north gate." More static. "No impact on the main structure besides the guest wing." Anthony exhaled slowly, the sound hot against Sophia's neck. "Keep them off the house. I want eyes on every angle. No one gets near this room." "Copy." The voices faded as Daniel switched channels. Anthony kept his body over hers for another long minute, listening, waiting. Sophia counted his heartbeats against her back, the rhythmic thud somehow keeping her anchored to reality. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. This time they were inside, the muffled thunder of boots on polished floors. The door to her suite, already hanging broken, was shoved fully open. "Clear," someone called. "Boss, it's us." Anthony finally shifted. He rolled just enough to take his weight off her completely and pushed himself up onto one knee, keeping his body between her and the window. The gun trained on the darkness beyond the shredded curtains. "Front," Daniel said from the doorway, breathless but controlled. "We've got you." Sophia turned her head just far enough to see him, framed by 2 members of the security team in dark clothes, weapons ready. Their eyes swept the room, taking in the destroyed window, the ripped mattress, the bullet holes, the 2 bodies on the floor. "Any hits inside?" one of the men asked, voice tight. Anthony shook his head. "She's okay." It took Sophia a second to realize he was including himself in that assessment, even though she could see, even through the dimness and the adrenaline, a darker patch on his left forearm where blood soaked into his skin. "We need to move you both." Daniel stepped cautiously around the glass, coming closer. "This room is compromised. Safe room until we finish the sweep." Anthony shifted his weight and finally looked down at her fully. The control on his face didn't match his eyes. His eyes were wild, terrified and furious, and relieved all at once. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried to sit up. Her muscles trembled badly. When she pushed herself upright, her shoulder screamed in protest, a hot line of pain reminding her of where she'd hit the bed frame. The rest of her body felt weirdly distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "I think so," she managed. He tucked the gun into the back of his waistband and slid one arm under her knees, the other behind her shoulders. "I can walk," she protested reflexively. His arms tightened. "I know. Humor me." He lifted her off the floor like she weighed nothing. Her fingers, traitorous and shaking, clutched at his bare shoulder. From this angle, she could see the full damage to her room. Glass everywhere, curtains torn, one of her framed photos smashed. The bullet hole in the headboard sat like a black eye inches above where her pillow had been. Her stomach lurched. If he'd been 30 seconds slower. She pressed her face against his chest, unable to look anymore. They moved fast. The security guys formed a moving wall around them, weapons out, eyes scanning every angle. The hallway lights were on now, harsh against Sophia's overtaxed senses. She caught glimpses of other doors ajar, shadows moving, the controlled chaos of trained men doing their job at 3 a.m. Lucia appeared at the top of the main staircase, a dark robe wrapped tight around her, feet in sensible slippers. She looked like every housekeeper in every expensive home Sophia had ever seen, except her eyes went straight to the blood on Anthony's arm and the dust and feathers in Sophia's hair. "Dear God," Lucia breathed. "Is she alive?" Anthony cut in. We're going downstairs. Safe room. Lucia stepped aside, but not before draping a thick throw blanket she carried over Sophia's shoulders. I'll bring coffee and supplies. The hallway outside Anthony's office looked exactly as it had the first time Sophia had walked down it. Polished wood, tasteful art, expensive rug. It felt different now, the air buzzing with urgency. Anthony set her down in the office just long enough to free his hand to open the hidden door. Sophia watched, dazed, as a section of bookshelf clicked and swung inward, revealing a steel door that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. He entered a code, pressed his thumb to a small panel, and the locking mechanism disengaged with a heavy final sound. The safe room was cooler than the rest of the house. Concrete floor, reinforced walls, no windows. A row of monitors displayed camera feeds from around the property. Front gate, back lawn, perimeter fence, interior hallways. A couch sat against one wall, a small kitchenette against another, and a bathroom door was partially visible in the corner. It wasn't cozy, but it was functional. Anthony carried her to the couch and set her down gently, like she might break. As soon as she was seated, her body started shaking in earnest. The adrenaline had nowhere left to go. I'm okay, she lied, wrapping the blanket tighter. No, you're not. Anthony dropped to a crouch in front of her. Up close, she could see now how bad his arm really was. A long, jagged gash along his forearm, skin split and raw, tiny glittering shards of glass still embedded in it. Blood had run down to his wrist and dripped off his fingers. You're bleeding, she said, voice hoarse. It looks worse than it is. He glanced at the monitors, then back to her. How do you feel? Dizzy? Nauseous? Any pain besides your shoulder? My feet, she croaked, only now noticing the sting. I stepped on. There was glass. His eyes flicked down, and his jaw hardened. Lucia! She must have been closer than Sophia realized, because the vault door opened almost immediately. Lucia came in with a first aid kit and 2 steaming mugs on a tray. Oh, child, she whispered when she saw Sophia properly. Here. She set the tray down and moved straight to her, efficient hands tucking the blanket around Sophia's legs and shoulders more securely. Drink. Sugar will help. Sophia wrapped shaking hands around the mug. The heat seeped into her skin, grounding her slightly. The coffee smelled strong and bitter, cut with too much sugar and cream. Exactly the way she usually took it. Let me see your feet, Lucia said gently. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Lucia slid the blanket gently aside, left Sophia's tank top and shorts alone, and lifted one foot carefully. Tiny red dots of blood marred the pale skin of her soles. Nothing major, but more than she'd registered at the time. Lucia cleaned them with practiced care, removing a few small slivers of glass and pressing bandages over the worst spots. On the other side of the room, Daniel spoke into a radio, his eyes never leaving the wall of monitors. East perimeter secure. Team 3 sweeping the tree line. Team 4 checking vehicle tracks at the north access road. No additional movement so far. Anthony watched the feeds like a hawk. Only when Lucia finished with Sophia's feet did he let her come near his arm. Sit, she ordered him, patting the cushion beside Sophia. He ignored the order to sit, and instead perched one hip on the edge of the coffee table, arm extended over his knee so Lucia could access the wound. Sophia watched as Lucia cleaned away the blood, pulling out embedded glass with tweezers. Anthony barely flinched, jaw tight, but otherwise stoic. Sophia forced herself to look at the damage. The cut was deep enough to need stitches if they were anywhere else. But here, in this world, she had a feeling good enough would be the standard. Lucia disinfected it with ruthless efficiency, wrapped it in sterile gauze, and taped it off. There, Lucia said. That will hold for now. You need a proper doctor later, but at least it's clean. Thank you, Anthony said. But his eyes were already back on Sophia, tracking every micro-expression. Lucia poured more coffee, set it within reach, then lightly squeezed Sophia's shoulder. You're safe in here. The walls are reinforced steel. No one can get through without Mr. Rinaldi's code. Safe. The word felt strange and heavy. Anthony moved back to the couch, this time sitting right beside Sophia, not touching, but close enough that their knees brushed when she shifted. He picked up his own mug, but didn't drink. His bandaged hand shook once, barely visible, before he pressed it against his thigh to still it. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "What's going on in your head?" "Bullets," she said before she could filter it. "I keep seeing that hole above my bed. It's right where my head was when I went to sleep." His jaw tightened. "I know. If you hadn't been in the hall..." Her voice broke, breath catching. "How did you even get there in time?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd been expecting that question. "I couldn't sleep. Security sent me an updated report before midnight. Something in it bothered me. Nothing concrete, just... My instincts wouldn't shut up." Sophia forced herself to focus on him. "So you were awake?" "Yes." He looked briefly at the monitors, then back at her. "I walked the east wing, checked the doors, the windows, the camera feeds. Your door. I didn't like that your room has an external exposure. You already said that before I moved in," she whispered. "That it wasn't as safe. And I moved you there anyway because I thought the security grid was enough." His gaze darkened. "That was my mistake. You didn't pull the trigger." "No." His voice turned flint hard. "But I put you in that room." Sophia took another sip of coffee. The trembling in her hands had lessened, but it was still there, just beneath the surface. Her shoulder throbbed in time with her pulse. Her feet stung dully under the bandages. "I don't understand how they got that close," she said. "Isn't this place impossible to get into?" "It's very difficult," Anthony corrected. "Not impossible. Especially if someone on the outside has help from someone on the inside." Sophia's stomach dropped. "You mean one of your people?" "Maybe. Or someone bribed a contractor months ago when we did renovations. Or someone got hold of old blueprints." He rubbed his jaw with his uninjured hand. "Daniel is finding out which one." But they knew enough to avoid certain cameras and hit a blind angle. And they knew which window was mine. "Yes, because they've been watching. Because they've been watching," he confirmed quietly. She studied his face. Beneath the iron control, the anger, the cold focus, there was something else. Something raw. Fear. Not generalized fear. Targeted, specific fear for her. "You were more scared for me than for yourself," she realized aloud. His eyes met hers. "Of course. You didn't even think. You just ran in there and threw yourself on top of me. That's the job. I'm not your job." The words came out sharper than she intended. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "No," he said. "You're not." They stared at each other. Everything that had been simmering between them since the selfie night, since before that, sat in the air. Undeniable now, impossible to shove back into the tidy box of employer-employee. On the monitors, the security teams moved like dark chess pieces across the property. Daniel reported that the shooter they'd dropped on the east lawn was being contained, that the runner had vanished into the dark, but that they had tire tracks and a direction. "It's a miracle you're both alive," Lucia murmured quietly, as she refilled their cups. Sophia flinched at the word. Miracle. It felt like too much, like jinxing it. "I brought her here to protect her," Anthony said. The statement was low, almost more to himself than to Lucia or Sophia. And the first real test of that protection, they get a shooter under her window. "You also got to her in time," Lucia pointed out. "You got to her before the third shot. You kept her from being dragged out of that bed while she was still asleep. That was you too." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "Not good enough." Sophia set her mug down carefully. "Anthony," he looked at her like he was bracing for a blow. "You can't make the shooters appear out of thin air and then blame yourself because they exist," she said. "You didn't invite them. You didn't put the gun in their hands. You got between them and me. I put you in this world," he countered. "I made you part of this by letting you stay. You made me part of this when you started having me in your house 3 days a week," she corrected softly. "When I became part of your routine. When they started taking pictures of me walking out of this door with that bag on my shoulder. The moment I stepped onto this property, I was in it. More than you wanted to admit." He said nothing, but his eyes told her she'd hit the mark. "You offered me a way out," she continued. "You said you could disappear me somewhere they'd never think to look. New name, new life. I did. And you'll still do that if I ask." Yes. His voice didn't waver. Even more so now. The room felt very small. Above them, the massive house, the grounds, the city pulsed along, unaware that everything had shifted for the people behind this steel door. "I'm not deciding that tonight," she said finally. "I can't. My brain is still stuck on the sound of my window being blown apart. That's fair, but I need you to hear something." She forced herself to look him straight in the eye. "I knew there would be danger when I chose to stay. I didn't know it would be like this, but I knew it wouldn't be simple or safe. I stayed anyway. I don't get to pretend I was dragged into this kicking and screaming." "You also didn't sign up for bullets in your bedroom," he said. "There's a difference between accepting abstract risk and having it come through your window at 3 a.m. No argument there." Her lips twisted. "But I also didn't sign up for you hovering outside my door because you couldn't sleep unless you knew I was okay." "And I got that too." His eyes softened, the harsh lines of his face easing just a fraction. "You make it sound like a good thing. You're bleeding because you cared enough to be standing in that hallway." She nodded at his bandaged arm. "That's not nothing." He exhaled, something like relief or gratitude flickering over his features. "You're handling this better than I expected. Give me time." She muttered. "I might still break. If you do," he said quietly, "I'll be right here while it happens." An odd calm settled over her at that. Not because the danger had passed. It hadn't. But because there was something solid next to her in this concrete box. Someone who had already proven what he would do when things went bad. Lucia busied herself at the kitchenette, pretending to give them privacy. Daniel's voice murmured updates into his radio. The monitors showed the ground slowly emptying of scrambling figures as teams finished their sweeps and returned to their posts. Eventually, the shaking in Sophia's hands dulled to a fine tremor instead of a violent quake. Her shoulders still throbbed, but bearably. Bone-deep exhaustion crept in, heavy and undeniable. "You should try to sleep," Anthony said, noticing the way she struggled to keep her eyes open. "In here." She glanced around the steel-walled room. "You're serious. Nothing gets through these walls." He stood, grabbed extra blankets from a cabinet and shook them out. "We stay down here until the house is completely cleared and the window is boarded up. No exceptions." "What about you?" "I'll be right here." He nodded toward the monitors. "I can watch the feeds from inside this room as easily as from my office." "I mean sleep," she said. "You're human, allegedly. You need it too." "For tonight," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth. "I'll settle for making sure you're asleep." He spread one blanket over the couch and handed her another. The couch wasn't huge, but it was wide enough for 2 people if they didn't mind proximity. "Anthony," she said quietly, as he turned back to the monitors. "I don't want to be alone." He stilled. Slowly, he looked at her over his shoulder. "Not tonight," she added. "Not after that. I know you're trying to be careful, to do this the right way. But if you put me on this couch and sit in that chair across the room watching cameras, I'm going to lie here with my eyes open replaying every gunshot for the next 6 hours." He studied her face, reading everything she didn't have the words for. "I don't need distance right now," she said. "I need you, here, where I can feel you breathing and know that if something else happens, you'll move before I even hear it." He crossed back to the couch without another word. "Shift," he said softly. She did. He lay down carefully behind her, the couch forcing them close, his chest pressed against her back, one arm sliding under her head as an extra pillow, the other settling over her waist in a loose, protective hold. The blankets cocooned them in shared warmth. "Is this all right?" he asked. She curled her fingers around his forearm, feeling the rough edges of the bandage beneath her palm. "Yes." His breath stirred the hair at the nape of her neck. "Nobody's getting through that door," he said. "Nobody's getting to you while I'm here. I believe you." It was the simplest truth she had in this moment. The house, the shooters, the betrayals, the what comes next. All of it felt too big, too complex. But the weight of his arm over her, the steady rise and fall of his chest against her back, the memory of how fast he'd moved when the glass shattered, those were tangible. Her eyes drifted to the monitors one last time. Tiny figures moved on the screens, finishing their sweeps, securing the perimeter. The image of her blown-out window appeared on one feed, taped off, lights glaring harshly in the night. She closed her eyes. The echo of gunshots still ricocheted faintly in her skull, but each time the memory tried to sharpen, it bumped up against the reality of Anthony's heartbeat under her hand. Solid. Relentless. Present. She didn't know what she would decide in the morning, whether this was a life she could live with, whether love was enough to make this level of danger bearable. For now, in this steel box underground with a Mafia boss wrapped around her like a shield, she let herself do the one thing her body had been fighting since the glass first broke. She slept. Sophia woke to the low murmur of male voices and the quiet hum of electronics. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The couch under her felt wrong, too narrow to be a bed, the air cooler than a bedroom should be. Then she registered the metal tang in the room, the faint glow of multiple screens, and the heavy weight draped over her waist. Anthony. They were still in the safe room. His arm held her snug against him, forearm banded across her middle, palm resting flat just under her ribs. His body was a solid line of warmth at her back, chest rising and falling slowly. At some point during the night, her hand had curled around his injured forearm, fingers resting just above the edge of the bandage. No additional movement on the east side, Daniel was saying quietly from somewhere near the monitors. Team's report clear. We've doubled the rotation on outside posts. No one in or out without visual ID and voice confirmation. Anthony's chest expanded against her as he took a deeper breath. And the shooter? Being handled off-site. Daniel hesitated. He's not top tier, a hired gun. But he knew enough to avoid cameras and hit that angle. That knowledge came from somewhere we didn't intend. Inside leak, Anthony said. Looks like it. Sophia kept her eyes closed, breathing slow and even. She wasn't ready yet to let go of the illusion of safety that came from pretending she was still asleep. The conversation washed over her in clipped phrases. Perimeter, blind spots, intel, containment. Words that belonged firmly to Anthony's world, not hers. The pattern fits with what we picked up before, Daniel went on. The O'Sullivan chatter about leveraging the translator. The timing matches too. This wasn't random. Sophia's fingers tightened unconsciously on Anthony's arm. His free hand came up, fingers brushing over the back of hers in a brief, reassuring stroke. He knew she was awake. He'd probably known the second she surfaced from sleep. Get me everything you pulled from the shooter, Anthony said. Names, contacts, payment. I want a direct line back to whoever signed off on last night. We'll have more in a few hours, Daniel replied. For now, we know enough. The order to grab her came from O'Sullivan's side. Whether Michael himself signed off or a hothead under him went rogue, that's still unclear. But it's them, the O'Sullivans again. Always circling at the edge of her understanding, faceless and amorphous until last night when their intentions had taken the shape of bullets. Give us a minute, Anthony said. Sophia heard Daniel's footsteps retreat, the soft click of the heavy door's inner mechanisms as it sealed behind him. Then it was just the two of them, and the quiet background hum of the room. You can stop pretending now, Anthony murmured near her ear. His tone was gentler than it had been when he'd been barking orders a few moments earlier. You've been awake for 10 minutes. She opened her eyes, caught by how easily he read her. You could tell? I can always tell. His thumb traced a slow line across the back of her hand. How do you feel? Like I got tackled by a truck, she said honestly. Everything aches. My shoulder hates you. Your shoulder can get in line, he said dryly. I've got a whole organization that hates me right now. She huffed out something that was almost a laugh, then pushed herself to sit up a bit. The movement pulled at muscles that had stiffened overnight. Anthony sat up with her, one hand hovering at her back, like he was ready to steady her if she so much as swayed. The security feeds showed gray morning light over the manicured lawns. Men still moved through some of the frames, but the chaotic rush of the night had settled into structured patrols. Did you sleep at all? She asked. A little. He rolled his shoulder, wincing faintly. You drooled on my arm at one point. I did not. There is forensic evidence. Liar. His mouth curved. Okay, you didn't, but you snore when you're really out. I absolutely do not. You do a little thing with your nose, he said, eyes warming. It's very you. Sophia looked away before he could see how that simple, oddly tender observation hit her. So, the shooter was O'Sullivan's. Shooter suggests a professional, Anthony said. This guy was competent but not elite, which almost makes it worse. Someone with real skill would have cost them more. They thought this job was easy enough for a second-tier asset. Grab the translator, Sophia said slowly. Use her to control you. Something like that. And now? She swallowed. What happens now? Anthony didn't answer immediately. He rose, crossed to the small sink, and splashed water on his face one-handed, careful to keep his bandaged arm mostly out of the stream. When he came back, his hair was damp and his features more awake, but the same hard calculation sat in his eyes. Now, he said, sitting beside her again, we stop being purely reactive. Last night was reactive, she repeated. They made a move. We survived it. We locked down. That's reacting. It keeps you alive in the moment, but it doesn't solve the problem. He laced his fingers together, forearms resting on his thighs. The problem is this. The O'Sullivans think they can use you as leverage. They see you as a piece on the board they can grab and move at will. Until that changes, you're not safe. Not really. Not in Boston, not here, not anywhere. Sophia absorbed that. So how do you change it? You change the calculation. His gaze flicked to the monitors, then back to her. Right now, they think taking you is worth the risk. To fix that, we make the risk unacceptable. Politically, financially, personally. Without open war, she said, remembering his earlier warning. You said that would be bad for business, and everything. Exactly. His mouth thinned. If I go scorched earth, bodies start dropping on both sides, cops get interested, federal agencies start sniffing around. It becomes chaos. Chaos is bad for everyone who depends on me, including you. She hated that this made sense. Hated that her survival now involved terms like politically unacceptable risk and collateral damage. I have a question, she said. Those men last night, if they'd gotten in, would they really have taken me alive? Yes. No hesitation. Killing you outright wastes the leverage. Taking you gives them options. Sophia couldn't stop the shiver that worked through her. Anthony's hand immediately went to the small of her back, his thumb drawing slow, grounding circles. Which brings us to the part of this you're not going to like, he said. We have to adjust your status. My status, in their eyes. Right now, you're valuable, but defined vaguely. Rinaldi's translator who comes to the house 3 times a week. That made you a tempting target. They think you matter, but they don't know how much. His gaze locked on hers. We change that. We make it clear to everyone watching that you're not a quiet, replaceable employee. You're under my protection in a way that has rules attached. She understood immediately. You mean publicly? Yes. So not just this woman walks in and out of your house. More like this woman is with him. Yes. That makes me more valuable to them, she said, heart-thudding. In some ways, he agreed. But it also changes who can credibly touch you. There's a difference between going after a convenient asset and going after someone everyone recognizes as the center of a man's world. The first is opportunistic. The second is an act of war. Not everyone on the O'Sullivan side is eager to pull that trigger. Sophia thought of the phrase from the intercepted messages he'd shown her. Leverage the translator. A clinical term for something ugly. Does this mean last night accelerates whatever you were planning with them? She asked. It forces the issue. Anthony leaned back, stretching his injured arm carefully. We were already moving toward a sit-down. They've been pushing on the edges of my territory for months. This, he gestured upward toward where her destroyed bedroom sat in ruins, is them testing how far they can go. And your answer is, we meet. On neutral ground. Public enough that nobody can pull a stunt without witnesses. Controlled enough that security can do its job. We clarify lines. We lay out consequences. We, she echoed. Who is we? Me. He hesitated. And this is where you get veto power. Possibly you. Her head snapped around. You want me there? No, he said bluntly. I don't want you anywhere near them. I want you locked underground until this is over. He huffed out a breath. But that's emotion. Strategically, having you visible at that meeting changes the calculus. How? Right now, they're guessing how much you matter. If I show up at a negotiation with you beside me, under obvious guard, it sends a message. This is not a piece you get to move without inviting everything that comes with it. It also puts a face to the abstraction. Makes it harder, psychologically, to talk about you like an object when you're sitting 10 feet away, breathing. You're trying to guilt-trip a Mafia rival, she said slowly. I'm trying to play on every human instinct available, he corrected. People behave differently when they have to look the person they're threatening in the eyes. Even men like Michael O'Sullivan. The name sat heavy between them. The rival she'd only known in theory was starting to take on shape. A man calculating enough to send shooters to her window, but also someone with his own rules and fears. And if I say no? She asked quietly. If I say I won't be paraded into some meeting so you can send a message, then we find another way. Anthony said immediately. This is your life. You get a say in how it's used. I won't drag you into a room you're not willing to enter. She appreciated that more than she could say. The last 24 hours had stripped control from her in a dozen ways. Having him explicitly hand a piece of it back mattered. Do you think it would work? She asked. Me being there. Yes. No hesitation. Because it forces them to acknowledge reality. You're not theoretical leverage. You're a person who now knows exactly how far they're willing to go. That knowledge cuts both ways. She stared at the monitors, at the slowly brightening grounds. You said something last night. That if you just hit back now, it's war. So this is you trying something between letting them get away with it and burning everything down. Exactly. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay. Anthony blinked. Okay, I'll go, she said. Her voice shook, but the words were steady. If that's what it takes to make them understand I'm not a pawn they get to move without consequences, I'll go. He searched her face. You're sure? No, she admitted. I'm not sure about anything right now. I'm scared out of my mind. But I also know I don't want to spend the rest of my life hiding in safe rooms waiting for someone else to decide I'm done being useful. If being in that room helps draw a line, then I'll be in the room. His hand closed around hers, strong and warm. You're braver than you think, or just too tired to come up with a better argument. She swallowed. What does that even look like? This meeting. We'll set it on territory neither side fully controls. Somewhere both of us have equal reason not to trash. Likely a restaurant that's already accustomed to hosting delicate conversations. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. There will be security on both sides. We agree to weapons rules beforehand. I'll have snipers in place. He'll have spotters. Everyone will know everyone is covered. That keeps egos in check. And me? You'll be escorted in with me, he said. Daniel driving, my men closest. You between us. You won't be alone for a second. You won't sit next to Michael. You won't speak to him directly unless you choose to. You're there as fact, not bait. Anthony. He tightened his grip once, sensing her rising panic. You'll be safe. As safe as anyone can be in a room like that. They can't touch you there without setting off something none of them actually want. You keep saying, they don't want war, Sophia said. But last night looked a lot like someone flirting with it. Someone under Michael. Anthony said. That's my read anyway. A hothead lieutenant trying to impress the boss by bringing him a shiny bargaining chip. Me. You. His mouth hardened. If Michael had personally ordered a full-scale move, it wouldn't have been 2 shooters on my lawn at 3 a.m. It would have been a coordinated hit on multiple fronts. This was pressure. A test. Now I push back and see whether he reins his people in or doubles down. She realized, with a sudden startling clarity, that this was what leadership looked like in his world. Not just violence, chess, reading pressure points, knowing when to press and when to pull back, knowing when to walk into a room full of enemies and trust that the rules holding everyone in place would actually work. If we go, she said slowly. You have to promise me something. Name it. No cowboy moves. No dramatic lunges. No deciding in the moment that you're going to take him out because you're sick of this dance. I'm agreeing to walk into that room on the assumption that we're there to talk, not to start the war you said would destroy everything. His lip curled faintly. You really think I'm that reckless? I think you love me enough to do something stupid if he so much as looks at me wrong, she said, the words slipping out before she could catch it. Silence fell between them. She felt heat climb her neck. She hadn't planned to say that now, raw and unarmored in the bright light of the safe room. Anthony's grip on her hand tightened again. Just a fraction. You're right, he said quietly. I do, and I won't. No cowboy moves. No first shots from our side. We go in with the intent to leave with fewer enemies than we walked in with. And if he doesn't play by those rules, then, Anthony said, eyes going colder than she'd ever seen them, we adapt. But I won't drag you into that room as cover for something I intend to do anyway. That's not who I am. She searched his face. Believed him. The inner door clicked again. Daniel stepped in, tablet in hand. Sorry to interrupt, he said. We've got more from the shooter, and I've put feelers out toward O'Sullivan. He's already heard about last night. Word is he's not pleased. Not pleased it failed? Sophia asked before she could stop herself. Not pleased it happened, Daniel answered, surprising her. A stunt like that without his clear approval makes him look like he can't control his own house. That's bad for a man like him. Bad for business. Anthony's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. So he has a mess to clean up, same as I do. Exactly, Daniel said. He's more likely to sit down now, if only to make sure no one else under him gets creative. Good. Anthony rose, all business again. Reach out. Tell him I want to meet. Today. Neutral ground. Daniel nodded. And Miss Grant? She comes, Anthony said. Daniel's eyes flicked to Sophia, gauging her reaction. You're sure? No, she said honestly, but I'm coming anyway. A brief glint of respect crossed Daniel's face. Understood. I'll pick a place with good sightlines and bad cell service. When Daniel left again, Anthony turned back to her. We have a few hours before anything happens. Try to rest if you can. Eat. Shower. We'll move you to an interior room to change. No windows. No more windows for me, she said weakly. Not for a while, he agreed. Interior walls only. She let him help her stand. Her legs felt unsteady, but they held, as they stepped out of the safe room into his office. The house felt different. Less like a fortress, more like a held breath. Upstairs, somewhere behind plaster and paint, her old room sat in ruins, bullet holes in the walls and shattered glass ground into the rug. Ahead of her, a future that now included walking into a private negotiation with a man whose people had tried to steal her from her bed. Between those two realities walked Anthony, one step ahead, his bandaged arm hanging at his side, his shoulders squared. Sophia followed, heart pounding, fully aware that there was no such thing as being half in this life anymore. He didn't kiss her in the car. The entire ride back from the restaurant, Sophia felt the words he'd said replaying in her chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. In the private room with Michael O'Sullivan, under too bright lights and too many eyes, Anthony had said it like an undeniable fact, that he loved her, that she wasn't leverage, that touching her would be treated as an act of war. He had looked at her as he said it, not at his rival, like he needed her to hear it just as clearly as Michael did. But in the SUV inching through late-night Manhattan traffic, he kept his hands to himself. Daniel drove, focused on the road. 2 other security cars flanked them, one in front, one behind. The city outside the tinted windows pulsed with its usual energy. Neon signs, late-night diners, people weaving between cabs. Inside the vehicle, it was quiet, insulated. Anthony sat beside her in the back seat, shoulders relaxed, but eyes alert. Every now and then, his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, checking the cars behind them, the sidewalks, the intersections. His jaw was set in that familiar line that meant his mind was still working, still turning over angles and outcomes. Sophia stared at her hands in her lap, at the way her fingers twisted together. She could still feel the faint impression of the restaurant chair under her palms, the weight of the room's attention when she'd walked in with him. She could hear Michael's accented voice, cold and assessing, as he'd apologized for a foolish subordinate over a glass of expensive whiskey. They had survived it. No one had raised a weapon. No one had made a sudden move. The truce had held. Now came the part that scared her in a different way. At a red light, Anthony finally looked directly at her. "You okay?" It was a simple question, and she could have answered it with a lie, and they both would have recognized it. Instead, she said, "Ask me again in the morning." He inclined his head. "Fair." She studied his profile for a moment. The set of his mouth was thoughtful rather than tense now. The fury he'd carried into the meeting had cooled into something quieter, resolved rather than explosive. "You meant it," she said softly. "What you said in there." His gaze came back to her, focused and unguarded. "Yes." "You told him you love me." The word still felt fragile in her mouth, like something that could shatter if handled too carelessly. "You told your rival that the woman he tried to use against you is the person you're in love with." "Yes," he said again, like there was no other possible answer. "And you said it for him to hear it," she went on, forcing herself not to look away. "But you also said it for me, didn't you? For both of you," he admitted. Michael needed to understand what he was dealing with. "And you—" His fingers flexed once on his thigh. "You deserve to hear it somewhere other than in the middle of a crisis bunker or shouted over gunfire." She let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. "You're not very good at timing." "I'm learning," he said dryly. The light changed. The SUV moved forward. Sophia watched their reflections slide along the dark glass of a storefront. A man and a woman sitting with too much space between them, both pretending to be calm. "When we get home," Anthony said after a moment, "we're going to have one conversation, before we talk about anything else. Before I get dragged into calls and debriefs and security briefings." "One conversation," she repeated. "About what?" "About everything," he said. "About what you want. About whether you're still in this. About what this even is." His mouth twisted. "That deserves to happen without Michael O'Sullivan watching me like a hawk from across a table." Her heart did a strange, complicated thing. Okay. The mansion was quieter than she'd ever seen it when they pulled through the gates. Security was visible now in a way it hadn't been before. Men at the perimeter, more cameras, subtle changes in how vehicles were checked as they entered. It felt less like a home and more like a command center that happened to have marble floors. Daniel pulled up under the covered entrance and put the SUV in park. "We're clear," he said, glancing back. "No tails." "Good," Anthony answered. "Get some sleep. We'll debrief in the morning." Daniel's gaze flicked to Sophia. A brief, respectful nod. "You did well in there," he said. "Most people without training wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes at that table." "Thank you," she said, meaning it. Inside, the house swallowed them with warmth and soft lighting. It smelled like whatever Lucia had been cooking earlier, faint traces of garlic and tomato and something sweet. For a moment, as they walked down the hallway toward his office, Sophia could almost pretend they'd just come back from a normal dinner date. It was the almost that hurt. Anthony opened the door to his office and gestured for her to go in first. When the door clicked shut behind them, the rest of the house seemed to fall away. The room was lit by the lamp on his desk, casting everything in amber. He didn't go behind the desk, didn't sit in his usual chair. Instead, he stopped in the middle of the room and turned to face her fully. "Sophia," he said quietly. There was something in his voice that made her straighten instinctively. "This is the part where you tell me you changed your mind," she asked, intending to make a joke of it and failing. The words came out too thin. "No," he said. "This is the part where I make sure you know exactly what my mind is." He closed the distance between them until he was standing just in front of her. Not too close. Not quite touching. The restraint made her want to grab his shirt and erase the space. "You asked me, the night of the selfie, if this was jealousy," he said. "If I was reacting to the idea of someone else seeing you instead of actually wanting you." "I remember," she said. At the time, I didn't answer that very well. I fell back on protection and security and all the ways I thought I was keeping you safe. His eyes stayed on her face, steady and unflinching. That wasn't the whole truth. The truth is simple. I love you. I'm in love with you. I have been for a long time. She swallowed hard. Since when? The 3rd week you worked for me, he said without hesitation. You corrected a translation that would have cost me a lot of money and a lot of face. You were nervous about telling me I was wrong, but you did it anyway because getting it right mattered more to you than whether I liked it. His mouth softened slightly at the memory. I went home that night more rattled than I'd been in years. I told myself it was because I'd almost signed a bad contract. It took weeks before I admitted to myself that it was because of you. Her throat tightened. And you decided, what? That you weren't allowed to want me? That I wasn't allowed to act on it, he corrected. Wanting you was unavoidable. Acting on it meant pulling you into this world in a way you hadn't consented to. It meant making you a target instead of someone the O'Sullivans only suspected might matter. And now I am one anyway, she said softly. A target. Because they escalated. His jaw hardened. Because they broke rules that were supposed to hold tacitly between us. They came into my home and tried to take you out of your bed. That changed things. In what way? In the way that any illusion I had about protecting you by keeping you at arm's length is gone. He exhaled slowly. You're in it, Sophia, through no fault of your own. That wasn't your choice. What is your choice now, is whether you want to be in it with me. She let that sink in. He wasn't pretending anymore. Not hiding behind professionalism or security concerns. He was putting the question in the middle of the room and waiting for her to pick it up. That's what tonight was about for you, she realized. Not just sending a message to Michael. Proving to me, and to yourself, that you're not going to hide me in the shadows while you pretend I'm expendable. Yes, his voice softened. I wanted him to see that if he touched you, he'd be touching me, not just my operations. Me. And I wanted you to hear, without sirens or gunshots or adrenaline, that I'm done lying to myself about how I feel. Silence stretched between them. Sophia's heart hammered, but there was a strange calm underneath it, like her mind had finally caught up to where her body had been for weeks. You asked me in the safe room if I wanted out, she said. If this was too much. If I needed to walk away. That was the one thing you never asked me in your office in the beginning, when you kept me at a distance. You made that decision for me back then. I did, he said. I convinced myself I was doing it for your good. That choosing for you was the only way to keep you safe. I was wrong. And now, she pressed, if I said right now that I can't do this, that it's too dangerous, that I want to go to Boston and pretend I never met you, would you let me? His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them again, they were raw. Yes, he said. I'd hate it. I'd fight it internally every second. But I'd let you go. I'd move heaven and earth to make sure you were protected wherever you went. I'd reroute resources, put people on you who never show their faces. You'd never see me again. But you'd be safe. The ache in her chest sharpened. He meant it. That was the worst part. He would let her walk away if she asked, would break his own heart, and build her a fortress somewhere else. Because he'd decided that was what loving her required. It would be easier to leave, she realized. Simpler. Cleaner. No meetings with dangerous men. No safe rooms. No waking up to gunfire. Just a new city. A normal job. A life where her biggest concern was whether the subway made her late. You talked about being selfish, she said slowly. About bringing me into this house because you couldn't stand the idea of me leaving. You know what's selfish on my side? What? Wanting you anyway, she whispered. Knowing what this life looks like now. Knowing what last night felt like and still wanting a future that has you in it. That's not rational. It's not sensible, but it's real. He took half a step closer. Sophia, you asked me earlier if I was still in this, she said. If I still felt the same after hearing bullets come through my window. I'm still here. I went into that meeting with you. I watched you sit across from a man who would have happily used me against you, and I didn't run. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, he said quietly. She drew in a shaky breath. I love you too. The words landed between them like a physical thing. Anthony looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. For a second, he didn't move. Then very slowly, his composure cracked. Not in any dramatic way. No tears, no collapse. Just a subtle softening of his entire face. A naked relief that made him look younger, less carved from stone. Say it again, he asked. His voice was rough. Please, I love you. The fear didn't go away when she said it. Neither did the awareness of what that meant, of what it would cost. But the truth was solid under all of that. I have for a long time. I tried to stop. I tried to move on. I tried to take a job in another state to make this easier on both of us. None of it worked. He closed the last bit of distance between them and lifted his hands to her face. Fingers framing her jaw, thumbs brushing along her cheekbones. You understand what you're choosing, he said. The danger. The instability. The nights like last night. I understand enough to know it's not going to be easy, she said. And I also understand that every time I imagined leaving, it hurt more than the idea of staying and being afraid. He kissed her then. It was nothing like the stolen moments in the kitchen, or the desperate collision of mouths in the safe room when they'd thought the world might end. This kiss was deliberate. Slow. His lips on hers. Firm and reverent. Like he was sealing something rather than testing it. Sophia rose onto her toes, hands fisting in the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. His fingers slid into her hair, deepening the kiss in gradual increments, giving her room to breathe or pull back or change her mind. She didn't. When they finally broke apart, breathing slightly faster, his forehead rested against hers. His hands stayed in her hair, thumb stroking the sensitive skin just behind her ear. I need to make you another promise, he said quietly. 2, actually. Okay, she whispered. First, he said, I will never lie to you about danger to make you more comfortable. I won't tell you you're safe when you're not. I won't minimize threats because I'm afraid you'll leave if you see them clearly. If something is coming, you'll know. She nodded, swallowing hard. And the second? The second is that loving you doesn't erase what I am. His voice stayed gentle, but the words were iron. I won't pretend this life is something it isn't. I won't tell you fairy tales about getting out clean in a year or two. I have legitimate businesses now, yes, but the parts of my world that draw men like O'Sullivan don't disappear because I want them to. If you stay, if we build something together, it's inside this reality, not some fantasy version of it. Sophia met his gaze. Then I need to make you a promise too. He waited. I won't punish you for what you can't change, she said. I won't pretend I didn't know what I was signing up for, and then hold it over your head every time something scares me. She drew in a breath. But I also won't stop calling you out if you hide behind that's how it is to avoid doing better where you can. His mouth curved slowly. You're going to be trouble. You knew that when you fell for me fixing your translations. She shot back. True, he conceded. He kissed her again, softer this time. And when they parted, he didn't move far. His hand slid down to rest lightly at her waist, fingers splayed. So what does this, us, actually look like now? She asked. Day to day. Messy, he said honestly. There will be days when it feels normal. Breakfast in the kitchen, you working on translations, me yelling at contractors. There will be days when the phone rings and I have to leave in the middle of dinner. Nights when security wakes us up because someone did something stupid 3 boroughs over and it ripples back here. And me? You, he said, will not be a ghost in this house anymore. Everyone already knows you're here. After tonight, they know exactly what you are to me. You'll still work if you want to. Translate, write, whatever path you carve out. You'll have security shadowing you in ways that will annoy you and sometimes scare you. You'll have a say in decisions that affect your safety. You'll see parts of this world most people only read about. You make it sound like a job description, she said wryly. In a way, it is, he admitted. Not a job. A role. The person at my side in this life isn't ornamental. It's not just about feelings. It's about trust, about judgment, about being willing to tell me when I'm being an idiot. You are an idiot sometimes, she said. I know. His gaze softened again. That's one of the reasons I need you. The weight of what he was offering settled over her. Not a fairy tale. Not a rescue. A partnership built in a dangerous world, grounded in hard truths and complicated logistics. Her mind flickered briefly to Ryan in Ohio, to the promise of Boston, to the version of herself who might have taken that job and never woken to gunshots or sat across from an Irish mobster in a restaurant. That version lived in a universe parallel to this one, forever out of reach now. This doesn't mean I won't get scared, she said. I expect you to get scared, he answered. If you weren't, I'd be worried. And it doesn't mean you get to make unilateral decisions for my own good anymore, she added. If you're going to change our lives in a major way, I get a vote. He nodded. You have my word. On everything? She pressed. On everything that touches you, he said. I can't promise you a seat at every business discussion. Some things are ugly in ways you don't need in your head. But if it affects your safety, your freedom, your life, you're in that conversation. No exceptions. She believed him. Not because she thought he was incapable of messing up, but because he was being deliberate now. Conscious. Choosing openness where he'd once chosen distance. Okay, she said again, the word heavier now. Then I'm in. With you. In all of it. Something like awe flickered through his eyes. He pulled her into his chest, arms wrapping around her in a tight embrace, as if some part of him still didn't believe she was really there, really choosing this. She pressed her face against his shoulder, inhaled the familiar mix of soap and cologne, and something uniquely him. They stood like that for a long time, the outside world pressing against the windows, while inside the office the axis of her life shifted and settled. Later, when she finally went to the interior room they'd set up for her, a room with no exterior windows, with reinforced walls, with a bed that hadn't been shredded by gunfire, she lay awake for a while, listening to the quiet. Her mind replayed the last week, selfies and fights and confessions and bullets, the weight of his body over hers, the cold air rushing through broken glass, the way he'd said I love you, like it was both an admission and a vow. When she finally drifted off, she did it with the knowledge that fear would be a regular visitor in this new life. But so would he, and for now, that was enough to steady her. Down the hall, in his own room, Anthony stared at the ceiling in the dark, feeling both more exposed and more anchored than he ever had. For the first time in years, he wasn't planning alone. The decisions ahead were heavier, because they touched more than just him. He turned onto his side, reached for his phone, and opened his messages. A photo stared back at him, a mirror selfie in a burgundy dress, posted days ago by a woman who'd thought she was invisible. He didn't ask her to delete it. He set the phone down, closed his eyes, and let himself imagine, just for a moment, that all the things they'd promised each other in his office were possible. In the fragile quiet between one crisis and the next, that belief was the only thing that made the rest of it make sense. 6 months later, the house didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a place that had learned how to breathe again. The changes were subtle if you didn't know where to look. Extra cameras tucked into eaves. New guards at the gate, more rotation on the night shifts, a different brand of SUV in the garage with reinforced panels you couldn't see unless you knew what you were seeing. But the rhythms of the mansion had settled into something that felt almost normal. Sophia stood at the kitchen counter, laptop open, morning light pouring through the interior courtyard windows. She'd claimed this spot as her workspace most days, ignoring the more formal office Anthony had offered her. The kitchen felt alive, staff coming and going, Lucia humming under her breath as she prepped meals, the occasional guard slipping in for coffee. It grounded her in a way 4 walls and a big desk never would. On the screen, a PDF contract blinked back at her. At the top, in clean serif font, was the name of a small New York publishing house. Below that, her own name, Sophia Grant, followed by the words, Translator of Record. She read the final clause again, even though she'd memorized it 2 days ago. Exclusive world English rights, modest advance, royalty percentage, nothing extraordinary in the grand scheme of publishing. But to her it felt enormous. You're frowning at good news, Anthony said from behind her. She hadn't heard him come in, but she knew that voice anywhere. She turned to find him leaning in the doorway, white dress shirt rolled to his forearms, dark slacks. No tie yet. Morning suited him. They softened the edges of the man who spent his nights putting out fires. "I'm not frowning," she said. "I'm processing." He pushed off the doorframe and crossed the room, coming to stand beside her. The faint smell of his cologne and coffee wrapped around her, familiar and comforting. "Processing the part where your name is going to be on the cover of a book?" he asked. She shrugged, unable to hide the small smile tugging at her mouth. "Maybe." Anthony bent, resting one hand on the counter, the other on the back of her chair, effectively caging her in. He glanced at the screen, then at her. "Sign it," he said. "You earned this." "You read the whole thing?" she asked. "Twice." His mouth curved. "Very boring. No hidden clauses about selling your soul to the Irish or stipulations that you must cease all association with dangerous men. Tragic," she murmured. "Those are my favorite clauses." He kissed the top of her head, the gesture easy now in a way it hadn't been months ago. Affection no longer felt like something snatched in stolen moments. It was woven through their days. Touches at breakfast, quick kisses in hallways, fingers brushing in passing. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but in a good way. The kind of nervous that means something matters. Then that's the right kind." He straightened. "You should tell her today. She'll want to know." "Her who?" Sophia asked, even though she already knew. "My sister," he said. "Valentina. She flies in today. It would be a shame if you waited until she was here 5 minutes before dropping by, the way I'm getting published." "Right." Sophia's stomach fluttered with a very different kind of nervousness. "No pressure or anything? Just meeting your sister who thinks you're a semi-respectable businessman and not—" She gestured vaguely. "You." "I told her the truth," he said. "My version of it. Enough that she understands the world she's coming home to. She's not fragile, Piccola. Little one. She's stubborn. You'll like her." "She's your sister," Sophia said. "I'm terrified." "You face down Michael O'Sullivan across a table," Anthony reminded her. "Valentina is easier. She doesn't carry a gun. She just carries very strong opinions and a stethoscope. That's not comforting." He reached past her and tapped the screen. "Sign the contract. Then we'll worry about my sister judging me." She took a breath, clicked where indicated, and watched her name rendered digitally at the bottom of the document. It felt anticlimactic for something that changed so much and yet so little at the same time. "There," she said. "Done." Anthony's hand came to rest on the back of her neck, thumb skating gently over the base of her skull. "I'm proud of you." She tilted her head back to look at him. "You helped. I didn't translate those chapters," he said. "I didn't stay up until 2 a.m. arguing with 19th century Italian syntax." "No," she conceded. "But you did read every version and pretend you weren't enjoying it." "I didn't pretend," he said. "I was enjoying it." "Your voice comes through even when it's someone else's words." Warmth spread through her chest at that. There had been a time when she doubted she had a voice at all. Now, between his world and her work, she was starting to believe she had several. The house phone on the wall buzzed. Lucia answered, listened, then turned toward them. "Gate says your 9 o'clock is early," she said to Anthony. "He's at the front." "Of course he is," Anthony muttered. He kissed Sophia once more, quick and soft. "Duty calls. Save me a copy of that contract. I'm framing it." She rolled her eyes. "That's weird. I'm a weird man." He winked at her and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Several hours later, the weirdness of their life reasserted itself in a very different way. Sophia was in the library when the alarm on her phone buzzed, a benign, everyday chime she'd set herself, not the piercing tone of the security system. It read, "Anthony's car check." She frowned, momentarily confused, then remembered. 2 weeks ago, after a particularly unsettling briefing about improvised explosives being used in Europe, Daniel had suggested randomizing vehicle checks before Anthony left the compound. Not because there'd been a specific threat, but because it's what smart people do when dumb people get creative. The randomness was key. Different days, different times, different cars. Today apparently had come up. Sophia closed her book, Italian poetry this time, for fun rather than work, and headed toward the garage level. She passed 2 guards who nodded respectfully, their presence so common now it barely registered. 6 months ago, knowing there were armed men in every hallway would have set her on edge. Now, it was just Tuesday. The garage was cool, and smelled faintly of motor oil and new tires. Anthony stood near the black sedan he used for most of his city appointments. Jacket off, sleeves rolled. He and Daniel were in tight conversation, their posture taut. "What's going on?" Sophia asked, slowing her steps. Both men looked up at her. Daniel's expression was a controlled blank. Anthony's was not. There was a line between his brows she recognized, one that only appeared when something had tripped his internal alarms. "Stay there," he said. She stopped immediately. Old habits from the shooting night hadn't gone anywhere. Daniel gestured toward the car. Routine inspection picked up something odd under the chassis. Weight differential, magnetic signature. "We called in the techs. They found this." He pointed to a small metallic device resting on a cart a good 20 feet from the nearest vehicle. It was about the size of a paperback book, matte black, with a mess of wires and a blinking red light that made Sophia's skin crawl. "Is that—" "Yes," Anthony said, or at least it was. "Inert now. They've disabled the trigger, but it's a bomb." She felt oddly calm. The panic she might have expected didn't crash over her the way it had with the gunfire. Maybe because this time it hadn't gone off, because they were standing here intact, having discovered it rather than survived it. "Do we know who?" she asked. "Not yet," Daniel said, "but we will. There aren't many groups with both the nerve and the know-how to plant that under your car on this property." "The O'Sullivans?" Sophia asked. "Unlikely," Anthony said. "We have an agreement. This is the kind of sloppiness Michael can't afford. If he wanted to break the truce, it wouldn't be like this." Sophia thought of the names she'd learned over the past months, the organizations that floated at the edges of their world. Russians, Albanians, cartels, people whose operations intersected with Anthony's in complicated webs of territory and money. "So someone else wants your attention," she said. "They didn't get the memo that you're busy keeping an Irish truce." "Everyone wants attention," Anthony muttered. "Some just ask for it with bombs instead of meetings." "Boss," Daniel cut in, "they're sweeping the rest of the fleet. We'll have an answer on whether this was a one-off or a more enthusiastic installation soon. For now, we're locking down vehicle movement." "Do it," Anthony said. He looked back at Sophia. "You're not leaving the property until I say otherwise." She lifted an eyebrow. "Because of that?" "Yes. What if I promised to wear a helmet?" His mouth twitched unwillingly. "Not funny. Little bit funny." He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Sophia." She sobered. "Okay. I won't argue. I like not exploding. It's become a new hobby." Daniel made a choked sound that might have been a laugh. "I'll let you know when we have something concrete," he said, then moved away, already barking orders into his radio. Anthony took her hand, fingers sliding between hers. They walked back up to the main floor together, leaving the cool garage and its ugly discovery behind. "You're not freaked out," he observed as they reached the hallway. "I am," she said, "but it's a different flavor than last time. Less blindsided. You're getting used to this," he said quietly. "I'm getting better at existing with it," she corrected. "There's a difference. I don't think you ever really get used to people trying to blow you up." "No," he agreed. "You don't." They ended up in the small sitting room off the library, one of the cozier spaces in the house, with deep chairs and shelves of books that looked actually read rather than curated. Sophia curled into an armchair. Anthony sat in the one opposite, elbows on his knees, hands steepled. "So," she said after a minute. "Car bomb." "So," he echoed. "Does this change anything? Big picture?" "It accelerates some things," he said, "clarifies others. Someone out there isn't happy with the stability we've been building. They think they can scare me back into old patterns. Or test me the way Michael's man tested me with you." "How do you respond?" she asked. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have dared phrase it like that. Now, it was how they talked. Not, "What are you going to do?" but "What do we do?" "Carefully," he said. "We trace where it came from. We follow money, components, skilled hands. We make it clear that trying to blow me up in my own driveway has a price. But we don't blow up a city block in retaliation. We don't become the thing they're trying to paint us as." She nodded. "Controlled anger, not wild." "Exactly." He watched her for a moment. Something like admiration in his eyes. "You really are in this now," he said. "Not just living in the same house. You understand how the lines are drawn." "I understand it matters who draws them," she said. "And how?" He smiled then, small and genuine. "Remind me to never underestimate you again." "You say that like you won't," she teased. Point taken. They sat in companionable silence until a soft knock sounded at the doorframe. Lucia appeared, balancing a tray with coffee and a plate of biscotti. Behind her, another figure hovered. Shorter, slimmer, dark hair pulled into a high ponytail, a rolling suitcase handle in one hand. "Someone's here to see you," Lucia said. Her eyes were warm, amused. "Or possibly him. Jury's still out." Anthony stood so fast his chair scraped the rug. "Valentina." His sister grinned, the expression bright and immediate. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a navy hoodie with the logo of a Viennese university hospital. A stethoscope dangled casually around her neck like jewelry. "Big brother," she said, dropping the suitcase handle and opening her arms. He crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. Sophia watched something in him unwind in that moment, some tight coil loosening that even she hadn't fully seen before. When he set her down, Valentina looked past him, eyes landing on Sophia. They were the same deep brown as Anthony's, but where his often held storm clouds, hers sparkled with quick intelligence and mischief. "And you must be the famous translator," she said, stepping forward without hesitation. "The one who fixed his life and his Italian." Sophia got to her feet, suddenly aware of the coffee stain on the hem of her t-shirt, and the way her hair was doing its own thing. "I'm Sophia. It's really nice to meet you." Valentina's smile turned softer. "He's different when he talks about you," she said bluntly. "In a good way. Less concrete, more human. Please stop talking," Anthony muttered. "Never," she retorted, then reached out and pulled Sophia into a hug, so quick and sure, it knocked the awkwardness right out of her. "Thank you for not running away from him," Valentina whispered near her ear. "Somebody had to stay." Sophia laughed, surprised and a little choked. "I tried," she admitted, "multiple times." "I know," Valentina said, pulling back. "He called me in the middle of the night when you accepted that job in Boston. I told him he was an idiot." "You did," Anthony said. Repeatedly, Valentina stepped back and took them both in with a doctor's assessing eye. "You look good," she pronounced. "Both of you. Slightly haunted, but good." "Car talk can wait," Anthony cut in lightly. "You just got off a 9-hour flight. Sit. Lucia will feed you until you forget airplane food is a thing." Lucia, already setting down the tray, snorted. "I'm not a magician, but I can try." They settled into the chairs, Valentina perched sideways in hers, feet tucked up, radiating a kind of restless energy that filled the room. Conversation flowed easily. Stories from Vienna, hospital rotations, colorful patients. She peppered Anthony with questions about the legitimate parts of his business and shot him pointed looks when he tried to gloss over other details. At one point, she turned to Sophia. "And you? Besides saving my brother from signing contracts written by idiots and getting published, what do you do all day in this marble palace?" "Apparently I also act as a human barometer for whether he's about to do something reckless," Sophia said. "And I complain about security following me into grocery stores." "Ungrateful," Anthony muttered. "We keep you alive. You call it complaining." Valentina's gaze sharpened. "How bad has it been?" she asked softly, looking between them now. "Really?" The question hung heavier than the room's earlier levity. Anthony opened his mouth, but Sophia spoke first. Bad enough that I don't sleep through every night, she said. But not so bad that I regret staying. Valentina studied her. Then she looked at her brother. And you? Any regrets? Only about the time I wasted, he said, before I stopped pretending I didn't want this. Valentina's eyes softened. Okay then, she said. I can work with that. Later, after Lucia had fed all of them to the point of near collapse, and Valentina had been shown to the guest suite carefully positioned in the safest interior section of the house, Sophia and Anthony found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace. The city spread out below them, a sea of lights and concrete and possibility. Sophia leaned against the railing, the evening breeze playing with the ends of her hair. Anthony stood beside her, their shoulders touching. How does it feel? He asked quietly. Being the woman who has both a publishing contract and a doctor in the family who now knows exactly how reckless her brother is? Overwhelming, she said, in a strangely good way. He fell silent, watching the skyline. For a while they didn't speak. The hum of traffic far below, the occasional distant siren, the murmur of the city going about its life, they all blended into a kind of white noise. You know, he said at last, 6 months ago, if someone had told me we'd have peace with O'Sullivan, averted a bombing, brought my sister home, and you'd have a book deal, I'd have assumed they were selling something. Like hope? She asked. Like delusion, he said. Hope wasn't really in my vocabulary back then. And now? He turned his head to look at her. Now I have you correcting my grammar and telling me I'm being dramatic when I deserve it. You often deserve it, she said. He smiled, then sobered. We're not done. There will be more nights like the ones we've had. Different enemies? New angles? This isn't a happily ever after. It's a work in progress. You mean life, she said. Yes. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. You still okay with that? She looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, other lives were unfolding. Simpler, maybe, or just complicated in different ways. She thought of her younger self, sitting in a cramped apartment with a translation gig and a crush on her boss, convinced she was invisible. She thought of the woman who'd posted a mirror selfie as both a test and a farewell. I'm not sure okay is the right word, she said slowly. But I'm here, on purpose, with you. That feels like the only thing I'm certain about. That's more than I ever expected, he said quietly. Down below, in the glow of the mansion's windows, Lucia moved through the kitchen, probably prepping breakfast for the next morning. Somewhere on the property, Daniel checked a perimeter camera, scanning for patterns no one else saw. In a guest room, Valentina texted friends in Vienna that she'd arrived, and her brother was less of a robot than advertised. Earlier, she'd finally made the call she'd been avoiding. Ashley answered on the first ring, a rush of relief and fury tangled together in her voice. Sophia kept it simple, safe, promised she was all right, and promised again that she hadn't vanished on purpose. When Ashley's anger broke into shaky laughter, Sophia found herself laughing too, damp-eyed and grateful. They set a date for coffee in a crowded cafe, soon, somewhere public, somewhere normal, somewhere Daniel could watch without being seen. Anthony had agreed without hesitation, because protecting Sophia didn't have to mean erasing everything that had once been hers. Life kept moving. Threats would come and go. Deals would be made and broken. Somewhere out there, someone was probably already sketching out the next stupid idea involving Anthony Rinaldi's name. But up here, on this terrace with the city laid out before them, Sophia let herself lean into him, resting her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her automatically, fitting like it had always been meant to be there. I spent years trying not to be seen, she said softly, thinking invisibility was safer, that if no one really looked at me, nothing bad could happen. And now? He asked. Now I know that being invisible isn't the same thing as being safe, she said. It's just empty. This is terrifying, but it's also real. He kissed her temple. You're not invisible anymore. No, she agreed. And for the first time, I don't want to be. They stood there until the air grew colder, and the city lights blurred at the edges of her vision from fatigue. Eventually, they went back inside, closing the terrace door gently behind them. The world outside would always be dangerous, unpredictable, messy. Their life together would never be neat. But as Sophia walked down the hallway, passing the room where her first bullet-scarred suite had once been, and the safe room that had become both prison and refuge, she realized something simple and startling. She wasn't surviving his world anymore. She was living in it.